Hey guys, tonight we slip straight into a world where the sky above you is not a calm, predictable dome but a moody storyteller, tossing you hints, warnings, and maybe a few cosmic pranks. You're standing on a muddy medieval road, cloak pulled tight, and the dark is that heavy kind that seems to press on your shoulders. A sudden streak of fire tears across the sky, so bright you gasp, and for one split second you're sure it's aiming right at your head. And honestly, yeah, you probably won't survive this if it is what the villagers said it was, a divine message in full attack mode. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is, because right now in this story it's definitely well past midnight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward, eyes adjusting, cheeks still tingling from the comet's flash. In the Middle Ages, every flicker in the sky feels personal, a mainstream historical fact. Medieval chroniclers honestly filled entire books about celestial signs, comets, eclipses, meteors, even odd halos around the moon. They really believed the heavens were a giant notification panel, dropping unread messages onto your life, and tonight you get front row seating right under the cosmic inbox. The villagers back in the last hamlet insisted the comet you just saw was a hairy star, which sounds cute until you realise they meant it as a prophecy of disaster. Something big is coming, they told you. War, plague, or an important person's death. They weren't specific, of course. Medieval omens rarely are. It's like getting a cryptic push notification that just says, something terrible will happen soon, and doesn't elaborate. As you walk, the night grows stranger. A silver arc shimmers around the moon, a perfect ring like someone traced it with a ruler. A lunar halo, scientifically caused by ice crystals, but in your medieval moment it feels like the moon is wearing a glowing wedding band. A farmer trudging beside you mutters that this always means the air is thinking dark thoughts. You nod politely, because that's what you do when strangers share weather-related anxiety shaped by centuries of superstition. Then the wind shifts. You hear nervous whispers behind you. Two travellers arguing whether the comet was a sign of divine anger or royal misbehaviour, as if the sky personally audited the king's tax receipts. Historians still argue whether medieval people believed fiery portents were messages from God, signs of natural imbalance, or polite warnings from the universe to get their lives together. But for the tired folk around you, there's no debate. The sky's alive, talkative, and frankly a bit judgmental. Another flare streaks across the firmament. Nothing huge, just a faint green smudge this time. You brace yourself, half expecting medieval paparazzi to leap from the bushes taking notes for tomorrow's chronicle. Instead, a child from the group gasps and points, shouting that it's a soul-fleeing purgatory. The adults hush him, but not because they disagree. They just don't want to attract attention from anything supernatural that might be listening. You quietly decide not to mention that in your time, it's more likely just a bit of space dust. No reason to break the mood, and also, let's be honest, the purgatory soul theory makes for better bedtime storytelling. A quirky fringe tidbit floats into your mind. Some medieval texts actually describe stars falling into the sea and sizzling like hot iron plunged into water. Writers swore sailors heard the hissing sound. You look at tonight's horizon and imagine a meteor plopping into the ocean with a comedic little st, like the universe is making tea. You reach a ridge overlooking a valley sprinkled with campfires. The air smells of wood smoke and damp earth. Someone hands you a crust of bread. They're convinced sharing food wards off whatever omen followed the comet. You accept it, even though their bread is about one moisture level away from doubling as a construction material. You chew anyway. Medieval hospitality isn't something you turn down unless you want people whispering that you are the bad omen. Above, the stars sharpen. They look close enough to pluck from the sky like berries. A monk in the group lifts his hands, chanting softly. He insists the bright star near Orion has grown larger tonight. You're about to reassure him it always looks like that, but then you stop. The medieval sky is a place of wonder and fear, and it feels wrong to peel away its mystery too quickly. Instead, you watch with him, quietly letting the moment be magical. A dog barks in the distance, then silence. Everyone freezes. The comet might be gone, but the feeling it stirred lingers, prickling at the back of your neck like static. You can't shake the sense that you've crossed a boundary, not just between villages, but between the ordinary and the uncanny. And that's when you see it, a soft, luminous glow drifting across the fields. Not fast like a shooting star, slow, steady, almost deliberate. The monk gasps. The child squeezes your sleeve. Someone mutters a prayer. You squint, trying to make sense of it. Ball lightning, a lantern, a trick of fog. But your medieval eyes, your story eyes, have no such categories yet. The lights vanish. Everyone exhales. Someone laughs nervously. You make a quiet joke, your first of 3 tonight, that if the sky's trying to send you a message, it could at least use subtitles. It gets a chuckle. The tension loosens. You continue walking, the path sloping downward, your boots squelching in the mud. The stars wheel overhead, as though guiding you deeper into a world where every flicker in the heavens feels like it carries intention. The road curves, trees gather around you, and the night begins to hum with new uncertainties. You tug your cloak tighter and keep your eyes on the sky, because in the Middle Ages the strangest things often begin above your head. You keep moving along the winding road, and even though the sky eventually settles back into its quiet sparkle, you can still feel that electric buzz under your skin, the kind that says the night isn't done being weird with you yet. And you're right, because as dawn stretches across the hills like someone slowly dragging a golden blanket over the world, you arrive at a small, smoky village where everyone seems to be heading in the same direction, clutching candles, bags, and the occasional chicken for reasons you don't quite understand yet. You follow the crowd, because you're that kind of curious wanderer now, and soon you find yourself pushing through a bustling courtyard outside a stone church. The air is thick with incense, chatter, and that distinct medieval combination of hope and mild body odour. At the centre of it all sits a polished wooden chest, raised on a little platform like it's performing on stage. Inside, you're told, are relics, holy relics, miracle bones. A mainstream historical fact. Medieval Europe absolutely adored relics. They cherished bone fragments, skulls, bits of hair, scraps of clothing, and in one famous case, what multiple towns each claimed was the real head of John the Baptist. Relic tourism was so big you could practically earn frequent flyer miles. If, flying existed. Today, you're stepping right into that world of faith, awe, and the faint suspicion that some of these relics may have been creatively sourced. A priest waves you forward. You shuffle up as reverently as you can, even though you're still half asleep and mentally comparing the vibe to a very crowded farmer's market. He lifts the lid of the chest, and inside sits what looks like a tiny bone, smaller than your pinky finger, resting on a velvet cloth. The man beside you immediately falls to his knees. The woman behind you bursts into tears. A kid gently tries to poke it before being pulled back by a scandalized grandmother. You're trying to look respectful, but a tiny part of you wonders if this bone once belonged to a particularly unlucky chicken. You keep this thought to yourself. The medieval crowd does not joke about bones. The priest announces that this relic once belonged to a saint famous for curing fevers. He gestures for people to pass beneath it to receive blessings. The line forms instantly, because if you're a medieval traveller, you don't treat potential miraculous fever protection like something to procrastinate. A quirky fringe tidbit. Some relics were so specific they bordered on oddly adorable. There were relics said to protect against nosebleeds, relics for helping cows give birth, relics that supposedly helped your bread rise properly, and even relics that promised to keep you from oversleeping morning prayers. You stand there imagining a saintly bone wagging its finger at a lazy monk. Miracles come in all sizes, apparently. When it's your turn to pass under the relic, you duck respectfully. The priest swings the small bone gently above your head, murmuring a blessing. You feel a warm hush fall over the crowd. Whether it's divine, psychological, or just the sun finally hitting your back, you're not sure, but there's a sense of peace, a soft stillness. Maybe that's the real magic here. As you step aside, you hear 2 men nearby arguing. One swears the relic glows brighter on holy days. The other insists it once hummed like a bee. They're mid-debate about whether the bone can move on its own when certain hymns are sung. A woman chimes in, claiming she once saw a relic blink. You blink back at her politely, unsure how one should respond to blinking bone theology before breakfast. Historians still argue whether relics were believed to contain actual supernatural power, or whether they were more like physical reminders that helped people focus their devotion. You look at the crowd, mothers holding babies, old men leaning on canes, travellers whose clothes are patched and threadbare. Whatever debates exist centuries away, right here, right now, these bones are hope made visible. But medieval relics are not just bones, they're events, festivals, spectacles. Markets spring up around them every time they're displayed. Sure enough, beyond the churchyard, vendors have set up little booths. You smell honeycakes frying. Someone is selling miniature wooden reliquaries shaped like tiny treasure chests. Another is offering scent-approved herbs that definitely look like ordinary weeds. But who are you to judge? Medieval capitalism is creative. You wander toward a stall selling pilgrim badges, little metal trinkets stamped with saintly symbols. Travellers wear them pinned to hats or cloaks as proof they've visited holy sites. You buy one shaped like a tiny foot. The vendor claims it protects against getting lost. You immediately trip over a rock. He assures you this is simply how blessings begin. Sometimes the saint likes to get your attention. Right, of course. That makes perfect sense. Further ahead, the church's side doors open, and attendants carry out a larger reliquary shaped like a golden arm. Everyone rushes to follow it, because the arm contains a relic said to bless crops. You join the procession, moving slowly down the road while villagers wave wheat stalks and chant. A dog trots beside you, howling occasionally as though trying to harmonize. The moment is weirdly joyful, slightly chaotic, and completely medieval. Halfway down the road, an elderly woman taps your arm and whispers conspiratorially that she once visited a monastery where monks displayed a single feather from the Archangel Michael. She leans closer, lowering her voice. It was very large, she says, eyes wide. You nod in total agreement, because challenging her on angel feather taxonomy feels rude. As the procession continues, sunlight glitters off the reliquary like it's winking at you. You think back to the tiny bone in the velvet-lined chest, the way people trembled in its presence, the way their faces softened as if the world felt a little less heavy. You realize medieval relics weren't just oddities or tourist attractions. They were anchors, tiny solid things in a world filled with sickness, uncertainty, and strange skies that wouldn't stop sending terrifying comet notifications. And as you follow the chanting crowd toward the fields, the road ahead seems to shimmer with possibility, as though you're stepping not just into fertile soil, but into the living memory of a world where bones glowed, saints walked unseen among travellers, and faith filled even the smallest objects with extraordinary meaning. You peel away from the relic procession sometime after midday, legs a little sore, stomach a little empty, and your cloak now carrying about 3 different kinds of incense smell. The road ahead winds between rolling hills, and you follow it quietly, letting the lingering murmurs of the crowd fade behind you. Birds chatter overhead, the sun warms your shoulders, and for a brief moment, the world seems almost normal, at least normal for a medieval wanderer who's already been dive-bombed by comets and blessed by a thumb-sized bone. But the quiet doesn't last. It never does here. As the path curves toward a crossroads, you spot a small group gathered around a rickety cart. They're talking in hushed, excited tones, the kind of whispers people use when they're discussing something miraculous, scandalous, or dangerously interesting. Naturally, you drift closer. You're becoming the kind of traveller who treats every rumour like a side quest. At the centre of the group is a pair of dusty pilgrims, siblings maybe, leaning against their cart like performers waiting for the right moment to begin their act. But they're not selling anything. They're telling something, a story, and everyone is leaning in with wild-eyed fascination. "We saw him," the woman says, gripping her cloak dramatically. "A saint, walking the road, in disguise." This sentence hits the crowd like a bucket of cold holy water. People gasp. A dog barks in the distance as if joining the conversation. You tilt your head, curious, because in the medieval imagination, saints don't just float gracefully in stained glass windows, they wander. They appear to travellers in need. They knock on doors, begging for shelter, testing people's kindness. It's like divine undercover boss. A mainstream historical fact, medieval stories about wandering saints were incredibly popular. People truly believed holy figures might stroll the countryside disguised as ordinary beggars, checking human behaviour like celestial secret shoppers. You listen more closely as the woman continues, her voice trembling with theatrical skill. "He wore the simplest wool robe," she says, "bare feet, dirt under his nails like he'd walked for days. But his eyes, oh, they shone like polished bronze. Her brother jumps in. He asked us for water, so we shared what we had. And then he blessed us. Right there on the road, said our journey would be safe. The crowd ooze. Someone crosses themselves. A merchant mutters something about wishing he had seen a saint before his last business trip, which apparently involved a lot more mud and a lot fewer blessings. You step a little closer. What happened after he blessed you? You ask gently. The siblings exchange a loaded glance. Well, the brother says, we turned away only for a moment, and when we looked back, gone, the sister finishes. Vanished. Not a footprint, not a shadow, nothing. There are dramatic gasps all around. You do your best supportive nod, because honestly, the story is surprisingly charming in its simplicity, and much like first-century plot twists, medieval miracle tales love a good disappearing act, but the story isn't over. The sister reaches into the cart and lifts out a small cloth bundle. She unwraps it carefully, revealing what looks like a smooth, round pebble with faint golden flecks. He left this, she whispers. The crowd leans so far forward that 3 people nearly fall over. The pebble glints in the sunlight. You're not saying it's magical, but it definitely has mysterious fantasy object energy. Someone in the group asks breathlessly, is it a relic? The siblings hesitate, just long enough to build suspense, then the sister shrugs. We don't know. It was warm to the touch when we found it. That's all it takes. The crowd erupts into quiet speculation. Is it a blessing? A test? A miracle? A rock that simply benefits from good lighting? A quirky fringe tidbit pops into your mind. Medieval pilgrims sometimes collected random stones from holy sites, believing they held sacred power. Some even claim the stones moved on their own if God willed it, which honestly makes you imagine holy pebbles tiptoeing around like tiny monks. The siblings offer to let people touch the stone, carefully, reverently, and one at a time. You watch as farmers, merchants, children, and weary travellers each press their fingers against it, eyes closed, lips moving through whispered prayers. When your turn comes, you place your hand gently on the pebble. It's cool, very ordinary, no surge of energy, no tingling, no sudden urge to speak in medieval Latin. Still, there is a sense of tenderness in the moment, a quiet recognition of how desperately people want to believe that help walks among them. Historians still argue whether these stories of wandering saints reflect actual encounters, symbolic tales, or clever ways to reinforce moral behaviour. But here on this dusty road, surrounded by people who look like life has given them more struggles than joys, the debate feels irrelevant. Hope is hope, no matter how it arrives. As the crowd disperses, the siblings climb back onto their cart, still glowing with the satisfaction of having delivered the day's best story. You linger a moment, thinking about the strange pebble, the vanishing saint, and the possibility that sometimes the world becomes softer, kinder, when people believe in a watchful goodness. You continue walking, the road gently sloping downward into a patchwork of fields. Birds wheel overhead. The sun warms your face, and you can't help imagining a saint in dusty sandals trailing somewhere behind you, smiling quietly, enjoying the chaos he accidentally caused. You make your second joke of the day, under your breath, wondering if the saint uses invisibility powers only when villagers start asking too many personal questions. As the path descends, you pass a shepherd who greets you eagerly. He tells you, without even introducing himself, that last winter he met a traveller who glowed faintly during snowstorms. Also possibly a saint, or a very committed man with frostbite. Hard to say. You leave the shepherd humming happily to his sheep, and the world feels magical again. Not in the explosive shooting star way, but in the quiet, comforting way. A way that makes you glance at every hooded traveller twice, just in case. Ahead, the trees thicken. The shadows deepen. Birds quiet down as if deciding to mind their own business. You pull your cloak closer, not out of fear, but anticipation. Because if saints can walk the roads disguised as humble travellers, what else might be waiting ahead, hiding in the folds of the forest? You take one last look behind you, half expecting a shimmering figure to wave goodbye. But it's just the dusty road, the bending trees, and the soft echo of stories that refuse to stay put. So you step forward, into the next strange medieval wonder lurking just beyond the trees. You step beneath the cool shade of the forest canopy, and instantly the world around you shifts gears. The sunlight, which just a moment ago was warm and steady on your shoulders, now filters through the leaves in thin, shifting beams, like someone's fiddling with a cosmic dimmer switch. The air grows stiller, cooler, a little too quiet. Even the birds seem to have collectively decided that whatever business you're about to walk into is none of theirs. The path narrows, twisting like it's second-guessing itself. You brush a branch aside and keep going, boots tapping softly over roots and damp earth. You've barely adjusted to the forest's hush before you spot movement ahead. 3 travelers huddled together, whispering fiercely, their eyes darting toward the deeper woods as though expecting something to leap out at any second. And, well, given how your week has been so far, something probably will. You give them a polite nod, the kind that silently asks, "Everything okay? Or should I start running now?" They jump at the sight of you, then relax when they realize you're just a regular mortal and not some nightmare creature. One of them, a lanky man with a patchy beard that seems to be losing a turf war, leans in close. "You're heading north?" he asks. You shrug. "That's the plan." He and his companions exchange glances. Then he says it in a tone people usually reserve for announcing tax increases or incoming wolves. "Beast men." "Ah, excellent. Perfectly normal forest conversation starter." Another traveller, a woman clutching a bundle of herbs to her chest, elaborates in a whisper. "We heard them last night. Growling, but I guess not like wolves. Talking, or something like talking." Someone else nods vigorously. Voices, but wrong. Too deep, too close. You blink and wait for more context, because this could refer to anything from bears to bandits to someone's very loud stomach. But no, apparently we're talking full-on medieval cryptids. A mainstream historical fact. Medieval bestiaries, those delightfully strange animal encyclopedias, were packed with descriptions of semi-human creatures said to live on the edges of the known world. Dog-headed men, people with faces in their chests, one-legged hoppers. According to the logic of the time, if a land was far enough away, something weird had to live there, and right now the travellers believe you're close to that border. You try to lighten the mood with a gentle joke, your first of the section, mentioning that if you run into a beastman you hope he at least has good manners. Maybe he'll offer snacks. This earns you exactly 1 nervous chuckle and 2 horrified stares. Tough medieval crowd. Before you can reassure them further, the woods groan. A long, low creaking sound that might just be a tree adjusting in the breeze, or something stepping on it. The travellers freeze. You pause too, but more because the suspense is kind of fun. Another sound follows, a deep, guttural rumble. It vibrates in the soil, in your shoes, in your bones. Not loud, just present. A sound that feels like it was designed to trigger the turnaround immediately part of your brain. The woman with the herbs whispers, "That's them!" You gently ask what exactly them is supposed to mean, and that's when the man with the patchy beard gives you the full tale. Beastmen from the northern wilds, he explains. Bodies like men, heads, not always. He gestures vaguely around his own face. Helpful. Some say wolves, some say boars, some say they change shape depending on who sees them. A fringe tidbit pops into your mind. Medieval travellers often described woodwoses, wild men covered in hair living in forests somewhere between human and animal. Sometimes dangerous, sometimes wise, often misunderstood. Early folklore influences. The man continues. They come at night, watching, walking upright, talking in low voices. You're pretty sure you've met party guests who fit this description, but you let the man keep going. "Last night," he whispers, "we heard them right by our camp. Heavy steps, sniffing." The woman shudders, snuffling, like they knew we were there. You tilt your head, listening to the forest. You hear wind, a few birds, the creak of trees, and under it all, maybe imagination, maybe not, a faint rhythmic thumping, like distant footfalls. You decide it's wiser not to assume anything. After all, you're strolling through a time when villagers confidently believed the world beyond a day's ride was basically the medieval version of a fantasy novel. Historians still argue whether stories of beastmen were rooted in encounters with unfamiliar tribes, misidentified animals, or pure imaginative folklore. Some scholars think tales of dog-headed men came from distorted reports of foreign customs. Others suspect they were metaphors for dangers lurking beyond civilization. And a few, ever the optimists, suggests that perhaps people just really liked drawing bizarre creatures in manuscripts. The travellers beg you not to continue north, but of course you do, because this is your adventure, and also because you want to see what all the snuffling fuss is about. You promise to come running back if anything tries to chew on you. They do not find this comforting. As you walk deeper into the woods, the light dims further. Your boots sink slightly into moss. The air feels charged, like the whole forest is waiting for something to happen. You remind yourself to stay calm. Worst case scenario, it's a wild boar. Best case scenario, free medieval cryptid sighting. Then you see it. A silhouette between the trees. Tall, broad, definitely upright. You freeze. It freezes. This is a classic medieval standoff. No one moves. The figure tilts its head. The shadowy shape of it suggests fur. Thick, uneven, bristling. You swallow. The creature sniffs loudly. The sound, cutting through the quiet like someone slurping soup in a silent library. You take a cautious step back. Another shape appears behind it. Then another. You're surrounded by tall, hulking figures, their eyes glinting faintly in the mottled light. Your heartbeat thumps in your ears. You consider whether you should greet them. Medieval etiquette for cryptids is not covered in any guidebook. Then, unexpectedly, one of them steps forward and lets out a low, rumbling vocalization that almost sounds like a greeting. And from behind a nearby tree, a shepherd bursts into view, laughing as a massive shaggy dog bounds happily past him. The beastmen freeze. The dogs, 3 enormous shepherd hounds, circle him, barking joyfully. The silhouettes dissolve into ordinary shadows. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Turns out giant dogs in dim forests can look remarkably like cryptids. You give yourself permission to laugh softly, partly from relief, partly because the medieval world seems determined to keep you guessing. Still, as you continue on the path, you can't help glancing over your shoulder, because for all you know, there are stranger things out there. The medieval imagination didn't invent fear, it just knew how to dress it in fur and fangs, and somewhere deeper in the forest, the trees groan again. This time unmistakably like something large shifting its weight. Just enough to keep your steps light and your curiosity burning as you journey on. You leave the forest with your heartbeat finally settling into something resembling a normal rhythm, though every now and then you still glance back, half expecting one of those shaggy beastmen to wave politely from behind a tree. The path widens, the air warms again, and soon the woods spit you out onto open farmland where wind shivers through tall grasses like they're gossiping about you behind your back. You follow the road toward a cluster of cottages dotting a hillside, simple homes with thatched roofs, smoke curling lazily upward, and chickens that look like they've been training for competitive escape artistry. You're just considering whether you should ask someone where the nearest inn is when you notice a small crowd forming outside one of the houses. People speak in low, reverent tones. Some carry baskets of bread, others bring candles or scraps of fabric tied into little prayer tokens. You know this vibe by now. Something extraordinary, or extraordinarily weird, is happening. A boy sitting on a fence calls out to you. "Are you here to see her?" he asks. You blink. "See who?" He leans forward, lowering his voice dramatically. "The girl who doesn't eat." Well, that's one way to get your attention. You follow the gathering crowd toward a modest cottage where villagers are quietly taking turns stepping inside. You slip through the doorway with a group of women, and as your eyes adjust to the dim interior, you see her, a young girl, maybe 12 or 13, sitting upright on a straw-stuffed mattress. She's pale but calm, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression serene, as though she's about to give you a recipe instead of being the focus of a medieval mystery. A mainstream historical fact. Stories of fasting saints, usually young girls, pepper medieval records. These individuals were said to survive for months or years without food, sustained solely by prayer, holy devotion, or the Eucharist. Some were revered, some were doubted, some tragically were caught sneaking snacks at night. But the stories persisted because medieval people viewed the body as a vessel that could be overridden by pure spiritual power. The girl's mother steps forward, speaking softly. "It has been 40 days, she says. Not a crumb, not a sip but blessed water." A murmur ripples through the visitors like a gentle breeze. You glance at the girl again. She's thin, yes, but she doesn't look like someone on the brink of collapse. Instead, she radiates a peaceful stillness, a kind of luminous patience. A friar kneels beside her, gently asking, "Child, do you feel hunger?" She shakes her head. "My stomach is quiet," she whispers, "like it is listening to God." You try to maintain a neutral face while your modern brain goes, "Okay, but biologically? No, but you're in second-person medieval life now, so you let the room's reverence settle around you like dust motes drifting through a sunbeam. The villagers ask her to pray for sick family members, injured animals, and even crops threatened by blight. She nods, moving slowly, deliberately, as though every motion carries weight. You notice how carefully she monitors her breathing, how gently she speaks. The girl seems committed not just to the act, but to the performance of holiness. A quirky fringe tidbit surfaces. Some medieval holy fasters reportedly survived on nothing but the breath floating from other people's meals, literally inhaling the vapors of cooked food like it was some kind of divine nutritional Wi-Fi. You try not to imagine medieval dinner parties full of guests sniffing stew with spiritual intensity. The girl's father now approaches with strangers from a nearby village. One man insists she must be blessed by heaven. Another whispers the possibility that she might be cursed. Someone else says her body is becoming more angel than human, which is a bold claim considering angels are famously demanding about their dietary requirements, or lack thereof. Historians still argue whether cases like hers were genuine psychosomatic conditions, purposeful deception, or acts of devotion encouraged by communities that desperately wanted living miracles. You glance around at the faces in the room, hopeful, desperate, exhausted, and you can see why they need her to be extraordinary. Life here is hard. Food is precarious. Illness is constant. A child untouched by deprivation feels like a promise. The girl turns her head and looks right at you. Her gaze is soft but piercing, like she's reading your thoughts with saintly Wi-Fi of her own. You give her a gentle smile, hoping it doesn't betray your confusion. "Traveller," she says quietly, "you carry fear from the forest." Well, okay, points for accuracy. The room collectively inhales. People look at you like you've just been spiritually diagnosed. She continues, "But you are safe. You're meant to walk farther." You nod, partly comforted, partly wondering if she overheard someone outside talking about beastmen earlier. Medieval acoustics are surprisingly generous. The father invites visitors to step forward and touch a piece of cloth near the girl's hand, something that might absorb blessing by close proximity. You gently rest your fingertips on it. It's soft, slightly warm, and nothing miraculous happens. No tingles, no divine voice whispering stock tips. But the atmosphere makes the moment feel sacred anyway. You step back as others shuffle forward, and you realize something striking. Regardless of what you personally believe, this girl is holding this community together. She is the still point around which their fear, hope, and longing all orbit. As you leave the cottage, you hear someone behind you whisper, "If she keeps fasting, she may levitate by winter." Someone else agrees wholeheartedly. You resist making a joke about floating being an efficient medieval commute option. Outside, the sun brightens, warming your face. You take a few deep breaths, feeling the fresh air after the thick, incense-tinged interior. The villagers continue filing into the cottage in a steady stream, each one carrying burdens that they hope a single, fragile girl might lighten. You walk down the road again, cloak fluttering behind you, and you can almost feel the girl's calm voice lingering at your shoulder. You can't decide whether she's miraculous, misunderstood, or simply caught in a swirl of belief stronger than she is, but she becomes another strange wonder in your growing list. Ahead, the road leads toward distant hills, and somewhere beyond them, barefoot prophets are rumoured to be shouting warnings about the end of days. You sigh. Medieval travel is exhausting, but admittedly excellent for storytelling. So you keep moving, ready for whatever strange medieval phenomenon comes next, preferably one that doesn't involve forest creatures sniffing you in the dark. You head toward the hills, letting the path curl upward beneath your feet like a giant stone ribbon. The sky shifts to a deeper shade of blue, and a warm wind pushes gently at your back, almost as if it's nudging you along, because the world has decided you're not done yet, not even close. In the distance, you can already hear it. Voices drifting on the air, rising and falling in a rhythm that sounds half like prayer and half like someone shouting the world's most dramatic weather report. The first thing you see is dust. Big, swirling plumes kicked up by dozens of barefoot people, moving across the ridge like a migrating flock. Some carry wooden staffs, some wave tattered banners painted with suns, moons, and alarmingly expressive eyeballs. And all of them chant in booming, echoing voices that bounce off the hillsides like thunder. You've stumbled into the territory of apocalyptic preachers, a mainstream historical fact. Medieval Europe hosted waves of wandering prophets who claimed the end of the world was imminent. They travelled from village to village, gathering followers with dire warnings about comets, plagues, eclipses, droughts, and taxes. Though the taxes part was usually implied, they pointed to strange weather or unusual celestial events as proof, which made your recent cosmic light show particularly convenient for their brand of messaging. As you approach the crowd, a wiry man with wild eyes and hair that seems to have declared independence from his skull leaps onto a boulder and raises a gnarled staff. "The world ends on the Feast of St. Bridget," he shouts. The crowd gasps. Someone asks, "Which one? The Spring Feast or the Winter Feast?" The man hesitates. This is clearly new information for him. "Both," he announces grandly. The crowd gasps again, apparently twice as impressed. You keep a low profile, weaving your way among the gathered believers. Some are kneeling, others are swaying. A few look like they aren't completely sure what's happening, but have decided that joining a dramatic group activity beats another afternoon of sorting beans. A woman carrying a basket of apples eyes you thoughtfully. "Have you come to prepare your soul?" she asks. You smile as politely as possible. "I'm keeping my options open." She nods solemnly, as though this is the wisest possible lifestyle choice. The main prophet, who has now climbed onto an even larger boulder, begins listing signs of the approaching apocalypse. His tone is grave, his gestures are enormous, his sense of dramatic timing is impeccable. "The rivers will run backward," he proclaims. A man beside you mutters, "Well, ours did once, but only because the miller built the water wheel wrong." He shrugs. The prophet points at the sky. "The heavens have spoken. A fiery serpent streaked across the night." You can't help making your quiet joke of the section, mumbling, "Pretty sure that was just space dust, but go off, king." Fortunately, no one hears you except a donkey, who seems supportive. Behind the main group stands a second cluster of preachers, apparently rival prophets, arguing loudly over whose doomsday date is correct. Their debate escalates rapidly from reasonable theological disagreement to something resembling an enthusiastic medieval rap battle. The crowd shifts between them like spectators at a tennis match. A quirky fringe tidbit flashes in your mind. Some medieval prophets claimed they had been shown visions by angels wearing shimmering cloaks, while others insisted they received messages from saints appearing inside wells, baked into loaves of bread, or painted across the sky by migrating birds. You either nearest flock overhead. They do not appear to be spelling anything out today. One of the rival prophets spots you in the crowd and marches over with the confidence of someone who's made extremely bold spiritual decisions before breakfast. He places a hand dramatically on your shoulder. "You," he booms, "you have the look of a wanderer touched by visions." You resist the urge to point out that your only recent vision was confusing a large dog for a cryptid. Instead, you offer a cautious, "Thank you." He nods gravely. "Tell me, have you felt the trembling of the earth, the warning tremors of the final days? You think about the time you tripped over a rock this morning. Does that count?" "I felt something," you say, opting for diplomatic vagueness. The prophet lights up as though you've confirmed his entire worldview. "Aha, another soul awakened." The crowd around you murmurs approvingly, impressed that you are apparently a visionary now. A few people move aside reverently, giving you space in case you need to start glowing or levitating. The prophet gestures for everyone to quiet down, then begins describing the signs he claims to have witnessed. A rooster crowing at midnight, hailstones shaped like teeth, and a goat that refused to walk north for 3 days. You nod sympathetically. Everyone has an off week. Historians still argue whether medieval prophetic movements were driven by genuine religious experiences, fear during unstable times, group psychology, or charismatic leaders who were just very persuasive at yelling. Probably a mix of all of the above. What's clear to you here, standing among these chanting hillside crowds, is that people aren't just listening. They're yearning for certainty, for meaning, for someone to tell them what comes next when the world feels too large and too unpredictable. The main prophet lifts his staff again, shouting, "Repent, prepare, the end draws near." The crowd erupts into a wave of emotion, crying, praying, hugging, possibly stress-eating apples. A group of barefoot followers begin marching in a circle while reciting verses in a rhythm that sounds suspiciously like a medieval exercise class. Someone hands you a small wooden token carved with a sunburst. "For protection," the woman says, "in case the world ends tonight." You accept it graciously. After all, it's rude to decline doomsday gifts. Gradually the crowd disperses, some heading toward villages to spread the warning, others continuing their pilgrimage with determined, anxious steps. The hillside grows quieter. The wind picks up again, brushing through the grass like a sigh after too much excitement. You stand alone for a moment, the wooden token warm in your palm. You think about how people cling to prophecy when the world feels overwhelming, how fear can shape belief, how belief can shape entire movements, and as you descend the hill, you can't help glancing at the sky, just in case it decides to drop another flaming serpent at you. Not because you think the world is ending, but because medieval skies have shown a flair for dramatic timing. You walk onward, the token swinging gently on its string, and the path bends toward the lowlands where strange creatures, supposedly dragons, have been spotted grazing in marshy fields. Because of course they have. You descend from the prophet-haunted hills and follow the road into a wide, marshy lowland where the earth feels a bit too soft under your boots, like it's thinking about swallowing you whole if you step in the wrong puddle. Tall reeds sway on either side of the road, whispering with every shift of wind. Frogs croak, birds call. The air smells faintly of mud, moss, and that unsettling hint of something large has been here recently. You quicken your pace. The villagers you passed earlier told you the marsh was home to dragons. Yes, actual dragons, as in leathery wings, fire-breathing tendencies, the whole mythological starter pack. But they also describe these dragons with oddly practical details, like one having a limp and another mooing more than expected, which feels like the kind of clue a medieval detective would find extremely helpful. Still, you're curious. You've just survived celestial portents, miracle bones, wandering saints, fasting girls, and doomsday hype men. Dragons would look great on your medieval bingo card. As you push deeper into the marsh, you notice trampled patches of tall grass, strange hoof-like depressions in the mud, and one alarming pile of, well, something that definitely came out of a large creature and is not the kind of thing you want to step in. You give it a wide berth. Your boots thank you. Then you hear it, a deep guttural bellow rolling across the reeds. You freeze. Your cloak flutters in the breeze. The bellow comes again, low, rumbling, and definitely not human. You crouch behind a tangle of reeds, because that feels like the heroic thing to do, even though the reeds are doing approximately nothing to hide you. Slowly, carefully you peek through, and there it is. A massive creature lumbers out of the tall grass. Thick, greyish hide, curved horns, a long heavy tail swinging behind it. Steam puffs from its nose as it splashes through shallow water. The villagers weren't wrong. This thing looks suspiciously, unnervingly, dragon-adjacent. Except, after a few seconds, your brain kicks in and reminds you that you're looking at a very large, very lost cow. But not just any cow. This one has scales glued onto its sides. You blink. The cow snorts. You blink again. Its owner, a farmer with a beard that could probably be used as a small nest, appears behind it carrying a bucket and muttering, "Come on, Goethe. Stop pretending you're a sky serpent." He catches you staring and beams proudly. Magnificent, isn't she? You absolutely cannot muster the heart to disagree. A mainstream historical fact. Medieval people occasionally mistook unfamiliar or oddly shaped animal remains, like whale bones, crocodile skulls, or giant sturgeon, for dragon remains. Museums and churches proudly displayed dragon ribs that were, in reality, mammoth bones or whale jaws hauled inland. And yes, some enterprising folks enhanced their livestock to create a little extra excitement, or income. You glance back at Goethe the dragon, who tosses her head with regal flair, sending one of the glued-on scales fluttering sadly into the mud. You offer the farmer a gentle smile. "She's impressive," you say diplomatically. "Oh, she's the finest dragon in 3 parishes," he boasts. "Terrified the miller half to death last week." You suck in a breath, trying not to laugh. The farmer looks so proud and the cow is trying so hard. You give Goethe a little wave of respect, but as you continue walking, the marsh grows thicker and darker, and you start hearing other things. Not cow noises, not farmer muttering, something deeper, closer, wet, like mud shifting under enormous weight. You tread more carefully. Ahead, a crowd of villagers gathers around a long, pale shape lying across a patch of shallow water. They've formed a reverent semicircle around it and are discussing loudly whether it has wings tucked in or keeps them invisible when sleeping. You inch closer. And then you see it, a gigantic, elongated skull, half buried in reeds, long jaws open in a permanent toothy grin. It's easily the length of 2 full-grown men. The villagers whisper excitedly, pointing to the curved teeth and bony ridges. One man announces proudly, "This is the head of the marsh wyvern." You pause, you squint. Your brain does a little medieval to modern translation. That is the skull of a crocodile. A really big crocodile, sure, but still, a crocodile. A quirky fringe tidbit pops up. Crocodiles were occasionally imported to medieval Europe as curiosities, often dying quickly due to climate or husbandry issues. Their bodies were sometimes preserved and displayed as proof of dragons slain by saints. Some churches even hung them over doors as trophies of good triumphing over evil. You examine the skull more closely. It's old, weathered, bleached by sun and water. The jawbones are partially intact, sockets empty and eerie. Someone has tied a red ribbon around one tooth for reasons you don't fully want to investigate. A little boy beside you tugs your sleeve and whispers, "Do you think it ate knights?" You consider your answer. "Probably not knights," you say. "Maybe large fish." He nods solemnly, clearly interpreting this as a polite way of saying yes, many knights. The village elder steps forward, holding a long staff decorated with feathers and dried flowers. He taps the skull gently and declares, "The wyvern fell here many years ago, struck down by St. Lanward, who fought with nothing but a wooden spoon." The crowd murmurs reverently. You try very, very hard not to ask follow-up questions about the tactical advantages of spoons in dragon combat. Historians still argue whether medieval dragon stories were metaphors, exaggerated encounters with real animals, or intentional political propaganda dressed in scaly skin. But as you stand here, surrounded by people who've woven wonder into every ripple of the marsh, the debate doesn't matter. What matters is that these stories make their world feel larger, more magical, more meaningful. And then, right as you turn to leave, the marsh explodes with sound. A real roar. Loud, ferocious, earth-shaking. The villagers scream. The boy hides behind you. The elder drops his spoon staff. You whip around and see the reeds thrashing violently. Something big is charging through them. Your heart leaps into your throat. Your legs brace. Your cloak billows dramatically, which would be cool if you weren't terrified. The creature bursts from the reeds, and it is another cow. A massive bull, to be precise. Splashing through mud like it's auditioning for the role of actual dragon. It bellows again, head lowered, horns gleaming. The villagers dive out of the way. You dive out of the way. The bull thunders past, kicks over a bucket, scares 3 chickens, and charges off into the next patch of reeds. Silence returns. The elder clears his throat, pats his robe, and declares, "The wyvern's spirit is restless today." You decide that, yes, this is your cue to continue your journey. As you leave the marsh behind, tall grass brushing your legs, you can't help smiling. Dragons may not be real, not the fire and wings kind anyway, but the medieval world didn't need reality to be literal to feel alive. Wonder, fear, superstition, and creativity blended together into creatures that stalked the edges of imagination, and occasionally mood. And something tells you that the strangeness ahead will make dragons, real or improvised, feel like the warm-up act. You leave the marsh with mud on your boots, a new appreciation for creatively accessorized cows, and the faint hope that whatever comes next will involve fewer hooves and more common sense. But the medieval world rarely grants such wishes. The road winds upward into gentle hills again, where the air feels crisp enough to wake you from even your deepest travel-worn trance. Up ahead, a cluster of small huts and gardens sits tucked against the slope, smoke drifting lazily from chimneys. You hear singing, soft at first, then rising in bright little bursts of melody. Birds. Lots of birds. The kind of chorus you'd expect in a peaceful woodland scene. Except these birds are harmonizing perfectly. With someone? You follow the sound toward a clearing. There, perched on a flat rock like he's giving the world's calmest outdoor concert, sits a monk. A simple brown robe, bare feet, a gentle face lined by sun and age. And around him, packed tightly like an audience that bought premium tickets, are dozens of birds, sparrows, doves, finches, starlings, and something that might be a slightly judgmental goose. The monk raises his hand. The birds quiet instantly. You blink. You look around to see if anyone else finds this odd. The handful of villagers watching from the edge of the clearing seem unfazed, as though they do. Birds synchronize spiritual retreats every Thursday. The monk opens his hand. One sparrow hops forward, chirps a few notes, and then the rest follow, weaving their voices into a surprising, strangely beautiful arrangement that somehow sounds like a hymn. You stare, mouth slightly open. You've walked through forests of imaginary beast-men and past crops blessed by glowing relics, but this moment, the soft harmony of tiny voices following the gestures of a serene monk, feels quietly magical in a different way. A mainstream historical fact bubbles up. While the famous story of St. Francis preaching to birds is the best-known example, medieval Europe held a widespread belief that holy hermits and saints could communicate with animals. Medieval texts describe monks whose prayers soothed wolves, commanded geese, or even persuaded mice to stop stealing grain. People saw this as proof that holiness restored the harmony of Eden, a kind of spiritual Wi-Fi connecting humans and creatures. The monk gently waves his hand again, and the birds settle silently around him. He looks up at you with a warm smile. "Traveller," he says softly, "you have walked far." You nod, slightly embarrassed, as if he can see the full itinerary of bizarre events you've collected this week. He pats the rock beside him. "Come, rest a while." You sit, careful not to disturb any of the feathered congregation. One pigeon eyes you suspiciously, like it's assessing your worthiness for bird adjacency. "I teach them the hymns," the monk explains, "and in return they keep watch. They warn me of visitors, storms, foxes, and the occasional grumpy goat." He says this with such casual sincerity that you forget for a moment to question any of it. A group of children approaches carrying small bags of grain. The birds perk up excitedly. The monk chuckles. They've learned that singing earns treats, a fair system. You watch as the children scatter grain with enthusiastic generosity. The birds flutter, peck, chirp, and then, right on cue, form a perfect ring around the monk again. It's like a medieval flash mob, but with more feathers and fewer complicated dance routines. One child tugs your sleeve. "He understands them," she says proudly. "Last week he told a crow to drop a shiny button back into my pocket, and it did." You nod approvingly. "Impressive." She leans closer. "My brother says the birds are angels in disguise, but he also said our goat is possessed, so we don't trust him much." The monk overhears and smiles quietly. Then he whistles. 3 short notes. Instantly, a handful of starlings lift into the air, swirling together in a coordinated pattern that whips your hair gently across your cheek. They fly in a loop, then swoop back down to land neatly in a row. The monk nods, pleased. "Teaching them takes patience," he says, "and understanding. They speak, not in words, but in intent." He gestures upward. "They know when a storm is coming long before we do. They feel the trembling of the earth. They sense fear, joy, sometimes destiny too." This detail settles into your mind with a soft weight. Destiny feels like a big claim in a world where cows are impersonating dragons, but somehow his voice carries a gravity nothing else has. "Do you believe animals understand holiness?" you ask. The monk considers this. "Historians still argue whether animals can grasp the divine," he says, slipping into a tone that somehow suggests he's aware of historians centuries in the future. "But I believe creation speaks in many languages, and sometimes we just forget how to listen." He lifts his hand again. A dove swoops down and lands right on his sleeve. You nearly clap, but the pigeon on your left looks like it would file a noise complaint. The monk strokes the dove's back. "This one has followed me for 3 winters. She arrived the day I chose to leave the monastery." "Why did you leave?" you ask gently. His smile turns wistful. "People needed help, and birds, they go where they're called." You let the words settle. There's something undeniably peaceful about this place. This clearing where human and creature share space without fear or struggle. It feels like stepping into a gentler world. A quirky fringe tidbit, a favourite actually, floats into your thoughts. Medieval folk sometimes believed birds carried souls, messages, or even warnings from the spirit world. Some villagers consulted birds before planting crops or making long journeys. There were stories of birds predicting marriages, deaths, or political upheaval. You glance at the flock around you. They do seem like the type who enjoy knowing secrets. The monk notices your expression. "Do you hear them?" he asks softly. You listen. Chirps, soft wing beats, a low coo. But underneath, maybe a pattern. A rhythm like language. Not words you recognize, but intention. A sense of being watched kindly, curiously. You nod slowly. The monk smiles. Good. The world opens when you sit still long enough. Then, because medieval serenity never lasts long, there's a loud crash behind you. A goose barrels out of the bushes, flapping wildly and honking in frantic outrage. The monk sighs. That one, he mutters, has no respect for peaceful teaching. More birds scatter in alarm. The children giggle. The goose charges in circles, honking like a feathered trumpet of war. You make your section's light joke. "I assume this one skipped choir practice." The monk chuckles, shaking his head. "She is spiritually independent." Eventually the chaos settles. The goose calms. The other birds return to their orderly formation, though a few side-eye the goose with deep avian disapproval. The monk blesses you before you leave, not with a dramatic gesture, but with a simple nod that feels like a warm hand pressed gently over your heart. As you step back onto the road, the birds watch you go, fluttering softly as though whispering a farewell in their secret sky language. You continue onward, the echo of their song still in your ears, and wonder what new, strange, beautiful thing the medieval world will sing to you next. You follow the winding path away from the monk and his feathered choir, and the hills gradually give way to flatter land. Broad meadows dotted with grazing sheep and tiny cottages that lean at angles, suggesting they're just a few strong breezes away from retirement. The air still carries that soft musical echo from the birds, and it keeps looping in your mind like the world's most calming earworm. But the peaceful mood doesn't last. As you approach the next village, the atmosphere thickens, literally. Smoke curls in slow, uneasy shapes from chimneys. Doors are half shut. Windows are barred. Even the chickens look suspicious. The entire settlement feels like it's waiting for something, or hiding from something. You step through the gate and immediately notice two men whispering near a well. They stop mid-sentence when they see you, exchange a worried glance, and one of them gestures frantically for you to approach. "You're not from here," he says, scanning your face like you might be carrying invisible danger. "Good. Outside eyes see clearly." You raise an eyebrow. "See what clearly?" The other man shivers. "The demons." "Excellent. Wonderful. Nothing like a warm medieval welcome." You let them lead you toward the village square where at least 30 people have gathered. Pale, wide-eyed, clutching rosaries or bits of wood carved with crude crosses. A woman mutters prayers under her breath. A little girl hides behind her father's cloak, peeking out with haunted eyes. Even the dog beside the blacksmith is trembling, which is frankly impressive considering it looks like it could wrestle a bear and win. The village elder, a stout man with eyebrows thick enough to qualify as wild animals themselves, steps forward and clears his throat. "You come at a troubled time," he says gravely. "For 3 nights now a demon has walked our streets." You take a slow breath. "What kind of demon?" He glances around nervously. Red eyes, long shadow, voice like grinding millstones. The crowd murmurs fearfully. Someone crosses themselves twice. The dog whimpers again for dramatic emphasis. A mainstream historical fact surfaces immediately. Medieval Europe was filled with accounts of towns and villages experiencing nightly visitations, strange figures seen at the edge of torchlight, unexplained noises, bizarre shadows caused by animals or wind, and sleep paralysis episodes interpreted as demonic attacks. People lived in darkness so thick and unbroken that imagination did half the work. The elder continues, "It begins near the church, a scraping noise, then footsteps, then glowing eyes in the dark. You glance at the shuttered houses, the tense villages, the too quiet streets. Night here must feel suffocating. What have you tried? You ask. Oh, everything, a woman replies. Prayers, holy water, herbs, singing loudly, singing badly, throwing turnips at it. You blink. Turnips? She nods, deadly serious. Demons hate root vegetables. The elder sighs. We don't know that for sure. We only know it hates our sleep. A child steps forward, tugging your cloak. I saw it, she whispers. It looked at me through the window. Its eyes were like burning coals. You kneel to meet her gaze. Did it speak? She nods. It said, You try to keep your face composed. Ah, yes. Classic demon dialect. The villagers look at you hopefully, as if you're the medieval Ghostbuster they ordered but expected to arrive 3 days late. You sigh softly and agree to walk the village with them tonight. A wave of relief ripples through the group, though some look mildly worried on your behalf, as if your survival is now the village's new emotional investment. Evening falls fast. The torches light one by one, each flame flickering against the darkening sky. The villagers huddle in their homes while you and the elder make slow rounds through the square, boots crunching softly on frost-hardened earth. The night feels thick, heavy, soundless. Then you hear it, a scraping noise near the church. The elder grips his staff. It begins. You swallow and move closer. The scraping continues, rhythmic and slow, like something being dragged across stone. Shadows dance. The torchlight trembles. Then, very faintly, you hear a voice, a low, gravelly rumble. The elder clutches his chest. The demon! You step toward the sound, your heartbeat thumping like a drum. Your cloak rustles. A cold breeze brushes your neck. A pair of glowing red eyes appears around the corner of the church. You freeze. They move closer. Your breath catches. The elder steps back, whispering prayers. And then the creature emerges. And it is a donkey. A shaggy grey, incredibly tired donkey, carrying a lantern strapped to its yoke, the flame reflecting in its eyes and making them look demonic red. You blink. The donkey blinks. The elder drops his staff. The donkey honks a long, soulful bray that absolutely matches the child's earlier impression of her. Your second joke of the section slips out before you can stop it. Well, at least it's not a possessed goose. The donkey walks right past you, dragging a broken wooden cart that scrapes loudly across the ground, the nightly demonic noise. It pauses only to nibble a weed before wandering off toward the far barns like a creature that needs a nap more than an exorcism. The elder stares, dumbfounded. We have been terrorized by Harold. One of the villagers calls from a doorway. Did you find the demon? The elder clears his throat. Yes, and we have pacified it. You decide not to explain the details. The crowd slowly gathers as they realize the danger is over. A ripple of embarrassed relief spreads through them. Several people apologize to you for the inconvenience. One woman insists on giving you a loaf of bread shaped like an angel. Another hands you a small jar of dried lavender for protection from future donkeys. As the village relaxes, laughter slowly replaces fear. People emerge from their homes. Someone starts playing a soft tune on a reed pipe. The dog finally stops trembling and immediately begins acting like it never trembled a day in its life. Historians still argue whether medieval demon sightings were symptoms of fear, superstition, sleep disorders, or simple misidentification. Animals mistaken for spirits, shadows misread as monsters. But standing here among villagers whose terror has transformed into sheepish humour, you realise it hardly matters. In a world lit only by torches, where imagination and darkness dance closely together, the line between supernatural and ordinary gets blurred fast. As you leave the village behind, the night feels lighter, softer. You walk with a small smile as the moon rises overhead, and you glance back only once to see Harold the donkey settling peacefully in the barn, glowing eyes fully extinguished. And you can't help wondering what strange, ancient wonder the road will reveal next. You continue along the moon-washed road, the air crisp enough to make your breath puff like a tiny ghost each time you exhale. After Harold the donkey's dramatic debut as a discount demon, you're feeling strangely buoyant. The night feels kinder now, like it's decided to take a break from jump-scaring you. But medieval travel rarely lets you keep that peace for long. As dawn warms the horizon, The road leads you into a small valley surrounded by gentle hills. A trickling sound greets your ears first. Water, bubbling softly, running over stone in a melody that feels soothing and a little mysterious. Then you see it. A spring tucked beneath an outcrop of moss-covered rock, steam curling from its surface as though whispering stories into the morning air. A crowd has gathered, carrying buckets, linens, herbs, and expressions so earnest you brace yourself for another wave of medieval weirdness. You approach, and a woman spots you instantly. "You there?" she calls. "Are you here for the waters?" You smile politely. "I'm open to the idea." She beams. "Good. This spring blesses and curses. It chooses who drinks well." You blink. "It chooses?" The woman nods with great seriousness. "Cursed Thomas drank once and sneezed bees for 2 days." You pause to consider whether she means that metaphorically. Her expression says no. Absolutely literal bees. You decide not to investigate further. A bearded man carrying 3 bundles of dried mint steps forward. "This water healed my left foot," he announces proudly, lifting said foot for emphasis. "But when my cousin drank it, he forgot how to whistle." You glance at the spring. It burbles innocently, like a little puddle pretending not to be a chaotic agent of fate. A mainstream historical fact floats into your mind. Medieval Europe was dotted with sacred springs and healing wells, believed to cure everything from fevers to infertility to curses caused by, yes, bees. Many were tied to saints or older pagan traditions, and people travelled miles to test their luck. Some waters were rich in minerals, some were geothermal, and some were simply cold enough to knock sense into anyone who dunked themselves. Here, people are taking turns dipping cloths, filling jugs, or simply kneeling beside the water with fervent expressions that range from hopeful to mildly terrified. An elderly woman motions for you to kneel. "Drink," she urges, "but think good thoughts. The spring can smell doubt." You kneel, cautiously. The spring emits small plumes of steam. The water is clear, swirling lightly with minerals. You scoop a bit into your hand. It's warm, almost silky. Just as you lift it toward your lips, a man behind you shouts, "Don't drink before sunrise. That's when it does the cursing." Half the crowd gasps, the other half groans. The woman beside you rolls her eyes. "Ignore him," she says. "He ate bad mushrooms last winter and now thinks everything is cursed after sunrise." The man argues back. "The bee's sneezes were real." The woman sighs. "Coincidence." The man folds his arms. Coincidence doesn't buzz. You decide this is your cue to take one modest sip without picking sides. The water is warm, earthy, with a faint metallic tang. Not unpleasant, just ancient. It settles in your stomach like a small sunbeam. You wait for a moment. No glowing, no coughing sparks, no bees attempting to escape your nasal passages. Good start. The villagers watch you intently. "How do you feel?" someone asks. You take stock. "Hydrated." They seem slightly disappointed that you neither collapsed nor sprouted wings. You reassure them with a friendly nod, and they brighten again. A young shepherd steps forward with a shaky smile. "This spring saved my sheep last winter. They were coughing terribly. I washed their hooves in it, and the next morning, perfectly fine." Another woman waves her hands dramatically. "But it made my husband's hair fall out." A chorus of agreement rises. Cursed, blessed, cursed and blessed, depending on the day. A quirky fringed tidbit pops into your mind. Some medieval wells were thought to be inhabited by spirits, sometimes benevolent, sometimes grumpy, sometimes just bored. People tossed offerings into the water: bread, hair, coins, tiny carved figurines, and occasionally socks, though you suspect that last one was an accident. Sure enough, as you peer into the spring, you see shiny trinkets glinting at the bottom. Coins, rings, and what appears to be a metal spoon. Maybe a saint dropped it during a miracle. Maybe someone just had bad aim. The village priest arrives, his robe slightly damp as though he's been blessing things aggressively this morning. He clears his throat. "This spring," he says, "is touched by Saint Meliora. She grants healing to the faithful." Someone interrupts. "Then why did it turn my cousin's eyebrows orange?" The priest sighs with practiced patience. "Faith must also be accompanied by humility." Another villager adds, "And maybe don't drink 5 full buckets at once." The priest nods. "There is also that." He gestures for silence and leads a brief prayer, inviting the spirit of the spring to bless those who come with pure hearts. As he chants, the crowd bows their heads. The water bubbles a bit more vigorously, perhaps responding, perhaps just doing spring things. The villagers gasp anyway. After the prayer, people begin sharing their stories again, some sincere, some dramatic, some suspiciously theatrical. A baker claims the water cured her insomnia. A carpenter insists his sneezing fits vanished after one sip. A child proudly announces the spring made her doll sit upright for the first time ever. You decide not to dissect that one too deeply. Then a scholarly-looking man steps forward, thin, nose slightly bent, the unmistakable aura of someone who reads more than he sleeps. "I've studied this spring," he declares. "The minerals are unusual, the warmth is geothermal, and the smell of bees likely came from the nearby hives. Nothing supernatural." The crowd stares at him, unimpressed. He lifts a finger. "However," now they lean in. "Some effects simply have no explanation. Historians still argue whether springs like this channel ancient beliefs, localized geology, or actual miracles." The villagers nod sagely. This has satisfied everyone, the scientific, the spiritual, and the theatrically afraid. You dip your hand into the spring once more. The warmth clings to your skin, soothing, calming. Whatever the truth is, minerals, magic, or medieval hype, the water feels peaceful, intentional, alive in its own quiet way. As you rise to leave, the villagers press small gifts into your hands, a sprig of mint, a pebble from the spring bed, a wooden charm carved into the shape of a droplet. For good luck, they say, for safe travels, for no bees. You tuck the charm into your pouch. As you walk away, the murmured prayers, heated debates, and gentle laughter blend with the spring's soft bubbling behind you. A warm breeze brushes your face, carrying the scent of moss and hope. You feel lighter, refreshed, maybe a little enchanted. And as the path carries you toward distant hills once more, you get the lingering sense that medieval water sources have personalities, some helpful, some chaotic, just like the people who crowd around them. Ahead you hear faint music, fast, frantic, and oddly rhythmic, which is your first clue that the next village can't stop dancing. You follow the road out of the valley, the spring's warmth still lingering pleasantly in your chest, like a tiny heated stone tucked beneath your ribs. But the peace begins to unravel long before you reach the next village. At first it's the distant thump 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 echoing over the hills, then the faint shriek of a flute pushed wildly past its limit, then shouting, then more thumping. By the time you crest the hilltop you see them. Dozens of people, maybe more, spinning, shouting, laughing, crying, waving their arms wildly, stomping the earth so hard the dust swirls like smoke. Men, women, children, elders, all moving as though someone replaced their bones with bees. Musicians stand to the side, playing frantically to match the chaos. Drums pounding, fiddles screeching, flutes wheezing like asthmatic snakes. You have found the dancing plague. You make your way cautiously down the slope, feet crunching on dry grass. The dancers don't notice you at first. They're too busy flailing, hopping, stomping, spinning, and occasionally falling over only to leap back up again like medieval jack-in-the-boxes. A woman darts past you, hair whipping behind her. She shrieks, not in fear but something stranger. Excitement, panic, ecstasy. Hard to say. A man follows her, arms pumping like he's rowing through invisible water. Another woman twirls so fast you fear she'll lift off like a poorly controlled helicopter. You spot a cluster of exhausted villagers watching from the sidelines. They wave you over frantically. "Don't get too close," one cries. "It might catch you." You blink. "It's contagious." Several nod vigorously. A worried father leans close. "My brother danced for 22 hours. His legs moved like they had a mind of their own. Nearly kicked our cow." You survey the scene again. People are drenched in sweat, clothes torn, faces flushed. A few are giggling uncontrollably, others are weeping. One man shouts, "The saints command it!" as he performs what looks like an interpretive dance about being attacked by bees. A mainstream historical fact slides into place. This is reminiscent of the real medieval dancing manias, most famously the 1518 dancing plague in Strasbourg, where entire crowds danced uncontrollably for days or weeks. Some collapsed, some died. The causes are still debated: mass hysteria, ergot poisoning, stress, religious fervour, neurological disorders, or some tragic cocktail of all the above. You watch a woman whirl until she falls to her knees, laughing breathlessly. 2 helpers rush to her, fanning her with cloths and giving her water. One of the musicians, a very sweaty drummer, spots you and waves his drumstick. "Help them dance it out," he shouts. "If we stop playing, they get worse." You glance sideways at the villagers. Is that accurate? A man shrugs sadly. "We tried not playing once. They just danced to silence. It was much creepier." A priest arrives, robes fluttering from the sprint he clearly just attempted. He carries a bucket of holy water in one hand and a loaf of bread in the other. You're about to ask how bread helps when he begins flinging both water and crumbs at the dancers while shouting blessings. A dancer catches a breadcrumb in her hair and screams triumphantly. You blink. "Effective?" the priest sighs. Historians still argue whether this is a curse, a sickness, or too many emotions trapped inside too many people for too many months. You nod. That tracks. A musician switches songs abruptly, something faster, and the dancers immediately shift tempo. You find yourself tapping your foot before you stop yourself. The villagers gasp. "Careful," a woman warns. "It starts with a foot tap." "Then a shoulder shimmy," says another. "Then you're gone." You decide keeping your limbs as still as possible is a wise strategy. One dancer, a tall man with grass tangled in his hair, stumbles toward you. His eyes are wild, his smile unhinged but friendly. "Join us," he pants. "It feels like flying." You edge back carefully. I prefer walking." He shrugs and cartwheels away. You have no idea how he still has the energy. A quirky fringed tidbit slides into memory. Medieval remedies for dancing mania included painting crosses on the dancing ground, playing specific calming songs, marching dancers to different towns, making them wear red shoes, and in one region, locking the dancers in a church until they got tired. You silently hope they remembered snacks. The priest gestures for you to follow him to a temporary shelter where the village is trying to help exhausted dancers recover. You step inside a thatched building where people lie on mats, breathing raggedly, feet twitching occasionally as if dreaming of more steps. Helpers dab foreheads, offer herbal teas, and whisper soft prayers that sound more soothing than magical. One woman grips your sleeve weakly. "I can still hear the drums," she whispers, "even when they stop." You squeeze her hand and offer a reassuring nod. Outside, the dancing intensifies again. Dust rises, music surges. A man yells, "The rain will come if we keep going!" Another counters, "The rain will stop if we keep going!" Then both continue dancing, because clearly the weather forecast depends on vigorous footwork. You stand at the edge, watching. Fear, joy, frenzy, release, grief. It's all here. A full spectrum of human emotion shaking itself loose in the most physical way possible. One of the musicians starts up another song, fast, chaotic, strangely catchy. You feel your foot twitch again. You glare at it. Behave. The priest exhales heavily beside you. "It will pass," he murmurs. "They always pass, and afterward, the village will sleep for days." As if on cue, one of the dancers drops to the ground, groaning but relieved. Helpers rush forward, carrying her to rest. You turn to leave, glancing back one last time. And in the rising dust, the dancers look almost dreamlike. Silhouettes weaving and collapsing, rising and spinning, like puppets pulled by an invisible thread. You wonder if the mania is madness or medicine, a desperate attempt by the mind and body to purge something unsaid. The road ahead beckons. You adjust your cloak, shake off the rhythm lingering in your bones, and walk away before your feet betray you completely. And soon, as the echoes of frenzied music fade behind you, a new sound creeps into the evening air, the distant thunder of hooves. Not horses, something lighter, faster. A whisper runs through the trees. The wild hunt rides tonight. Night gathers slowly around you as you walk away from the exhausted, dust-coated village, the last echoes of frantic drums fading into the distance. The silence that replaces them feels almost exaggerated, like the world is catching its breath after watching far too much chaotic medieval cardio. The path dips into a stretch of dense woodland, tall pines leaning inward as though sharing secrets across the road. Your boots crunch on fallen needles. The air smells of resin, moss, and something else. something electric. A wind stirs, sharp and cold. The hair on your arms lifts. Something is coming. Your steps slow. Not out of fear, you've already been sniffed by imaginary beastmen, accidentally blessed by a fasting girl, and mistaken for a visionary by a doomsday hype squad. No, this is different. This is the kind of stillness the world uses right before it turns a page. Then you hear it. A distant rumble. At first, you think thunder, but thunder doesn't gallop. Hooves, dozens of them, pound the earth somewhere beyond the trees. Fast, feverish, unnatural. You freeze, straining to listen. The sound grows louder, sweeping closer like a wave of invisible cavalry rolling straight toward you. A branch snaps overhead. Birds launch into the sky in a panicked burst. Leaves whirl even though there's no breeze. And then the glow appears. Faint at first, pale green, like moonlight filtered through water, then brighter, shifting, flickering, moving fast. The villagers in the last hamlet warned you that this region was haunted by the wild hunt, a spectral cavalcade that thundered across the night sky, led by restless spirits or ancient gods, depending on who you asked. You had laughed politely at the time. You are not laughing now. The forest vibrates with the approaching force. You step back into the brush just as the wind intensifies, swirling dead leaves into small tornadoes. The glow expands, a rolling wave of eerie luminescence pouring through the trees. And then they burst into view. Not quite solid, not quite smoke. Riders, dozens of them, galloping through the night on horses made of shadow and moonlight. Their armor shimmers like frost. Their eyes burn with ghostly fire. Each figure carries a spear or banner that leaves streaks of glowing mist in its wake. Your breath catches. You've never seen anything more terrifying and more breathtaking in your life. A mainstream historical fact hums through your mind. Stories of the wild hunt appear all across medieval Europe, in Norse sagas, Germanic folklore, British legends. Sometimes the hunt is led by Odin, sometimes by ancient kings, sometimes by spectral warriors doomed to ride forever. People believed seeing the wild hunt foretold war, plague, or death, or that witnessing it marked you as chosen or doomed. You pressed deeper into the shadows as the first riders thunder past. The hooves make no sound when they strike the earth. Their horses don't breathe. Their cloaks ripple even when the air is still. One figure at the front raises a shining horn carved with intricate patterns. He blows into it, and the blast that erupts shakes the trees, rattles your bones, and makes the night itself quiver. Behind him, more riders surge forward, shifting forms that blur between human and something wilder. Antlers crown one rider's helm. Another's cloak seems woven from feathers. A third appears to have no face at all, only swirling smoke beneath a hood. You cling to a tree trunk, heart pounding. The cavalcade curves through the forest, a river of spectral power cutting the darkness apart. The ground trembles, not physically, but in that dreamlike way where reality ripples without fully breaking. One rider turns its head toward you. Its eyes flare bright orange, like the colour of a dying ember, and for a moment you're pinned in place, unsure whether it sees you, senses you, or simply glimpses a thread of your fate. A soft whisper, impossibly gentle amid the chaos, slips through the air. Walk. You don't know if the voice is yours or theirs, but your feet obey. You take a single, cautious step backward, and the rider's gaze drifts away, the cavalcade sweeping past you in an endless flowing arc. As the last riders tear through the trees, the light fades, the thunder of hooves recedes, the wind settles, the forest exhales long after you do. You stand trembling, not from fear, but from awe. A quirky fringe tidbit pops to mind, making you almost laugh. Some medieval folks claimed you could bargain with the hunt, offer bread, salt, or even your shoes to keep the riders from dragging you along for eternity. You glance at your boots. Absolutely not. You intend to keep them. Gradually, the forest quiets fully. Crickets return timidly. An owl hoots. Somewhere, a fox barks in annoyance, probably upset the spectral stampede interrupted its dinner plans. You exhale slowly, letting the tension drain from your limbs. Historians still argue whether tales of the wild hunt came from real events, like large groups of night riders, storms that sounded like hoofbeats, or hallucinations spurred by fear and exhaustion. But standing here, surrounded by the lingering shimmer of moonlit dust and the echo of ghostly trumpets, you know explanations barely matter. Some legends feel too alive to be dismissed. You continue walking once the forest settles completely, your breath warming the cool night air, your thoughts buzzing like the tail end of a powerful dream. The whisper you heard, real or imagined, still rings faintly in your mind. Walk, so you do. And as dawn pushes its pale fingers through the trees, you reach a ridge where old astronomers are staring intensely at the sky, because in this world of strange wonders, the heavens themselves are sending messages again. Dawn finds you climbing a narrow, stony ridge with the kind of fog that clings to your ankles like a needy pet. The night's encounter with the wild hunt still tingles in your bones, every breath reminding you of hooves pounding through the dark. But morning softens everything. Birds chirp determinedly, as if trying to overwrite the memory with something more cheerful. The first hints of sunlight peek over the hills, washing the world in pale gold. As you crest the ridge, you see them, a small cluster of astronomers, medieval style, which means robes, scrolls, astrolabes, long pointy hats, one supremely floppy, and the exact energy of people preparing to argue for several hours without blinking. They're gathered around a rough stone platform topped with instruments that look like someone asked a blacksmith to build a compass with commitment issues. Brass rings glint. Wax candles gutter in the breeze. Charts covered in cramped handwriting are pinned down with rocks. You hesitate because last time you encountered people staring at the sky, they started predicting doom. But this group seems less apocalyptic and more academically caffeinated. One astronomer immediately spots you and waves you over with frantic enthusiasm. You there, good eyes? Excellent. Come, we require a witness. A witness? To what? Did the sky commit a misdemeanor? But you step forward anyway, because curiosity has defeated self-preservation at least 10 times on this journey already. The astronomer thrusts a parchment at you. It's filled with scribbles, constellations, circles, and what might be a tiny doodle of a confused sheep. He points dramatically to a cluster of stars on the page. Last night, he begins, these 3 stars shifted. The other astronomers gasp. A few mutter prayers. One scribbles furiously. You squint at the stars on the chart, then at the sky, then back at him. Shifted how? He lowers his voice ominously. Left. Another astronomer corrects. It was up. A third waves them both off. Diagonal. The argument escalates immediately, and you find yourself slowly stepping backward like someone trying to avoid stepping on a lit fuse. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. Medieval astronomers were deeply invested in the movements of stars and planets, not only for calendar making and navigation, but for predicting everything from plague outbreaks to political drama. Astrology and astronomy were tightly intertwined. The sky was considered a cosmic instruction manual if you knew how to read the fine print. The lead astronomer regains control by loudly clearing his throat. We have discovered, he says grandly, that the heavens are sending a message. Everyone nods gravely. You ask gently, what message? He blinks. Well, we're still negotiating that part. Another chimes in, but it is definitely meaningful. Stars do not simply wander. You glance up skeptically. Stars absolutely do wander. They just do it extremely slowly and without filing paperwork. But you let them continue. The astronomers begin taking turns explaining their theories. One claims the shifting stars foretell the birth of a legendary ruler. Another insists it means a king will fall. A third believes it signals an upcoming surplus of beans. You're honestly not sure which is the most alarming. Nearby, a young apprentice is drawing the sky on a slate. He pauses to whisper to you. I think the stars shift because the earth moves. Then he adds quickly, but Master says that's heresy, so please pretend I said nothing. You give him a discreet thumbs up. The astronomers pull out another chart, this one showing planetary movements. Someone gasps. Mars is brighter today, a scholar nods. War, another counters, or fertility. A third scribbles notes. Possibly both. War babies. Must research. You privately hope they have a glossary for whatever they're doing. A quirky fringe tidbit floats up. Medieval stargazers sometimes believed meteors were literal messages thrown by angels, and halos around the moon were warnings about wolves, famine, or royal scandals. Some even thought eclipses were caused by giant celestial dragons eating the sun like a cosmic snack. You decide not to mention you once watched an eclipse through a cardboard cereal box. These guys would absolutely lose their minds. One astronomer pulls you toward the stone platform where a giant brass ring, an armillary sphere, sits gleaming. He adjusts it dramatically. "Observe," he says, "the angle is different today." You lean in. It does appear slightly tilted, but mostly because one of the supporting pegs has sunk into soft dirt. You don't mention this. These astronomers look like they bruise easily, emotionally at least. A particularly intense scholar steps forward, eyes shining like he hasn't slept since the last century. "The stars speak," he says quietly. "We just haven't translated the language yet." He gestures at his notebook. It's full of symbols, diagrams, and something that looks suspiciously like a tic-tac-toe grid. You nod politely. "Historians still argue," he continues, "whether the heavens are fixed or moving, whether they mirror the affairs of humans or command them." He leans close. "Tell me, what do you believe?" You inhale slowly. The wind stirs the parchment in your hands. The stars overhead, still faint in the morning light, twinkle with that timeless indifference that says, "We've been doing this long before you, and we'll keep doing it long after." "I think," you say softly, "that stars move in their own time, and we move in ours." The astronomer stares at you, stunned. Then tears well dramatically in his eyes. "Beautiful," he whispers. "Utterly incomprehensible, but beautiful." He begins scribbling your words into his notes, likely misquoting you wildly in the process. Another astronomer offers you a cup of something warm, herbal tea judging by the smell. You sip politely, then cough politely, then politely consider flinging yourself down the hillside to avoid drinking more. It tastes like someone boiled moss until it confessed its crimes. The astronomers continue debating wildly around you. The stars predict storms. No. Weddings. No. The price of turnips. You quietly set the tea down before it becomes a problem. Finally, as the sky brightens fully, the astronomers pack their instruments and scrolls, still lecturing each other with great passion and zero consensus. They wander down the ridge, arguments floating behind them like trailing cloaks. You walk on, feeling oddly lighter. The sky above seems calmer now, as if relieved that no one is currently trying to interpret it. But as you descend into the next valley, you feel a strange tug, like the world is leaning in toward you again. The trees shift, the air cools, and somewhere ahead, a voice echoes faintly through the woods. Not a human voice, not quite an animal voice, a whisper, calling your name in the patterns of the leaves. Ahead lies a forest that isn't entirely empty, and definitely isn't entirely honest. You descend from the astronomer's ridge with your mind still buzzing, half from their frantic star theories, half from that tea that tasted like someone's strained regret through a sock. The morning sun slowly brightens the world, turning the mist into glowing ribbons that cling to the low places. You follow the road into a valley stitched with tall pines and moss-covered boulders, the kind of landscape that looks serene until you remember medieval landscapes love turning serene into spooky with zero warning. And right on cue, the air shifts. Not colder, not warmer, just attentive. The breeze drops away, birds hush. Even your footsteps seem quieter, as though the forest floor is trying very hard not to attract attention to your presence. You slow down. Because you've learned something important on this journey. When the world goes unnaturally quiet, it's either about to bless you, confuse you, or scare 10 years off your lifespan. Then you hear it, a whisper, very faint, soft as breath, floating through the trees, your name. You freeze mid-step. The whisper comes again, just barely audible over the faint rustle of branches. This time the voice sounds familiar, comforting, but you can't place it. A parent, a friend, a memory you forgot you had. You step forward slowly, heart doing that awkward thump flutter that means you're excited, terrified, intrigued, and mildly annoyed that this is happening before lunch. Another whisper drifts through the branches. This one longer, shaped like a phrase, though you can't make out the words. It echoes between the trees like the forest is mimicking speech rather than producing it. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Medieval Europeans often believed forests were inhabited by spirits, echoes of the dead, trickster beings, forest guardians, or echoes from the other world. Deep woods were places where the boundary between this life and the next felt thinner. People swore they heard voices of lost loved ones calling to them under the boughs. You step into a clearing and the whisper sweeps past you again, brushing your ear like a cold feather. You turn so fast your cloak nearly takes flight. No one is there, but the echo remains, faint, lingering, pulling you deeper. This is usually the part of medieval stories where someone either discovers divine wisdom or falls into a very inconvenient fairy trap. You proceed with caution. The forest thickens. The path twists. Moss muffles your steps. The whisper returns, this time sharper, as though trying to imitate speech but not quite succeeding. You murmur, "Is someone there?" Your voice sounds too loud, too human. And the forest answers with a mimicry of your own words, distorted, stretched, repeated softly like a question at the end of a long tunnel. You swallow. Okay, that's new. A quirky fringe tidbit tickles your thoughts. Certain forests were believed to contain echo spirits, creatures that imitated the voices of travellers to lure them deeper. Some scholars think these legends emerge from natural acoustics or animals capable of strange vocalizations. Others believe they're metaphors for the way fear can echo inside the mind. Still, standing here, it feels less metaphor, more plot twist. The whisper shifts again, no longer your name, but another voice entirely. Soft, feminine, warm. A voice you know you've heard before but can't immediately place. It says, "Come here." You tense. You know that voice. Not from this world. Not from this century. You take one step toward it, compelled. But then the voice changes mid-echo, warping into something not human, drawing out the last syllable until it turns into a hiss. You jerk back. The voice shifts again, now belonging to someone else entirely, deeper, almost playful. This forest is impersonating people. You rub your arms, goosebumps everywhere. The trees rustle as though laughing quietly at your confusion. Historians still argue whether forests like this felt uncanny, because people projected their fears onto the silence, or because certain pockets of nature really did mimic sound in eerie, deceptive ways. Something about acoustics, hollows, wind tunnels, large birds, or spiritual beliefs shaped by isolation. You listen closer. This time the forest whispers in yet another voice, a child's, then an elder's, then one that doesn't sound like a person at all, just breath on bark, rustling like syllables trying to form. You take a deep breath and speak aloud, voice steady. "All right, forest, cute trick, but I'm not wandering into the bushes just because you learned voice impressions." As if offended, the whisper stops entirely. The silence deepens. Then you hear footsteps. Not echoes. Actual footsteps. Light. Quick. Coming from your left. You whirl, but again, nothing's there. You take a cautious step back and the footsteps follow, mirroring your movements exactly. One step, then one step behind you. 2 steps, then 2, like a child imitating an adult, but with far worse social skills. You stop. They stop. You raise one foot slowly. Something behind you raises its foot, an unmistakable soft crunch. You spin around. There is nothing, just trees standing too still, branches bent as if listening. Your heart drums. You murmur your light joke of the section. "Okay, if this is a squirrel messing with me, congratulations, you win." The forest does not laugh, but something shifts. Not a sound, just a feeling, like the air behind you folds. You step forward instinctively, and the moment you do, the mimic footsteps stop permanently. The forest sighs, all at once, as though exhaling tension, and then silence. Real silence. Not the watchful, charged hush from before. A gentler quiet, like the woods have grown bored of the game and decided to release you. You walk on, breathing deeply. The trees grow taller, then gradually thinner. Light filters through again. The whispers fade. The mimicked footsteps cease entirely. You emerge from the forest and onto a small hilltop overlooking a market town, a lively sprawl of tents, stalls, and chimneys. People bustle about. No whispers, no imitations, normal voices. You exhale in relief. But as you step onto the road leading downward, you hear one last faint murmur from the trees behind you. Your name, spoken perfectly. You turn sharply. Nothing moves but the breeze. Historians can argue all they want. Some mysteries don't want to be explained. You follow the road toward the town, where a new rumour swirls through the market stalls of a strange child prophet who tells futures while selling onions. And after the forest's voice tricks, honestly, you're ready for something at least slightly more straightforward. You make your way down the hill toward the bustling market town, grateful, truly grateful, to hear normal human noise again. Real voices, real conversations, no trees whispering your name, no forest imitating your footsteps like a mischievous echo spirit. Just people shouting about bread, chickens yelling about nothing in particular, and haggling that sounds like aggressive poetry. The town square buzzes with life. Merchants wave ribbons, hawkers slap fish onto wooden boards, smiths hammer metal with rhythmic thunks. The smell of spices, yeast, wood smoke, and livestock swirls around you. After the uncanny quiet of the forest, the chaos feels downright comforting, like slipping into a warm bath of humanity. You weave through the crowd until a sudden ripple of whispers catches your attention. There he is, the prophet child. Quick, before the onions sell out. You stop. Onions? Your curiosity, already chronically nosy, perks up immediately. You follow the flow of murmuring townsfolk as they gather near a small wooden cart. A crowd forms a semicircle, leaving a little clearing of dusty ground around a boy no older than 9. He sits cross-legged on a folded cloth, surrounded by bunches of onions arranged like tiny offerings. His hair is messy, his tunic patched, and his expression calm in that unnerving way children get when they absolutely know something you don't. A woman pushes forward, clutching a basket of eggs. "Please, tell me," she pleads. "Will my husband return safely from the river trade?" The boy picks up an onion, turns it in his hand, stares into its papery layers like reading a tiny vegetable scroll of destiny. Then he nods. Yes, but he will lose one boot. The woman gasps, grateful. "I knew it! He's terrible with boots!" She pays him with 2 eggs and rushes off, relieved. You blink. You really are witnessing medieval fortune-telling via produce. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Medieval Europe adored divination. From reading dreams to interpreting comets to casting lots, people turned to any sign they could find. Children, believed to be innocent and closer to the spiritual world, were sometimes credited with prophetic insight, especially during odd events or times of stress. Some became local celebrities, others, well, got grounded by the church. The boy turns to his next client, a potter with clay still under his fingernails. "Will the fair bring profit?" the man asks, nervously rubbing his palms. The child reaches for a small red onion this time, clearly the premium prophetic model. He holds it close to his ear, listens intensely, then sets it down with solemn gravitas. "Yes," he says, "but someone will try to cheat you with a cracked jug. Watch for a man with a green hood." The potter bows gratefully, dropping a handful of coins into the boy's basket. Next in line is a group of teenagers, giggling and daring each other forward. One steps up. "What about me?" she asks, smirking. "Do I marry this year?" The boy grabs a hefty yellow onion, one large enough to double as a blunt force weapon, and rolls it slowly between his palms. "No," he says, "you will trip during the spring festival." The crowd oohs. The girl scowls as her friends laugh like hyenas. You step closer, because at this point you need to know whether the child is an actual prodigy, a very observant kid, or just extremely committed to the bit. He notices you. His head tilts slightly. You stop mid-step because his eyes, sharp, bright and too knowing, briefly widen as if recognizing you. Which makes 0 sense. You've never been here. You're a walking anachronism. And yet, you, he says, pointing at you with an onion like a tiny prophet wielding a vegetal scepter. The crowd hushes. You blink. "Me?" He nods gravely and gestures for you to sit. You do, because you've learned that refusing a medieval child prophet is like refusing a blessing, a test, and a potential curse all at once. He selects a small white onion, studies it, turns it once, twice. Then he presses it to his forehead with startling seriousness. Everyone leans in, even the onions seem to lean in. Finally, the boy sets the onion on the cloth and looks at you with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "You walk toward danger," he says quietly, "but not danger meant for you." Your spine tingles. The crowd murmurs. He continues. You will see a creature of snow twice, and the second time it will speak. You blink. Twice. Why twice? Why snow? Why is an onion telling this story? A few villagers gasp like this is the most dramatic vegetable-based prophecy they've heard all week. Someone whispers, "Is it the winter spirit again?" Another mutters, "Maybe the mountain ghost." The boy looks at you earnestly. Be kind when you meet it. It is lost. You nod slowly. Thank you. He hands you the onion he used for your prophecy. You accept it because refusing feels like the kind of decision that angers folktale spirits and leads to inconvenient curses, like forever smelling faintly of leeks. Children crowd closer, asking the boy whether he can predict when the next rain will fall or whether the mayor's pig will win the harvest fair. He answers each one calmly. Some predictions hopeful, some petty, some absurdly specific. A quirky fringe tidbit wiggles into your brain. There really were medieval practices where people used onions to divine things, especially on holidays like St. Thomas's Eve. People would carve names into onions to predict marriage prospects, place them under pillows to dream of the future, or judge fortunes by the way onions sprouted in winter. So yes, onion-based magic is historically legitimate. Wild, but legitimate. As the boy continues his consultations, the village priest arrives, clearly already frazzled from dealing with people who ask too many astrology questions. What is this now? He sighs, eyeing the vegetable prophecy circle. But before he can scold anyone, the child prophet hands him an onion. This one is for you, the boy says simply. It wants you to rest. The priest stares at the onion, at the boy, at the onion again. Then he sighs. You know, I might. The crowd laughs warmly. Historians still argue whether such child prophets displayed genuine intuition, clever observation, or social pressure shaping belief around them. But sitting here, watching the boy work with humble seriousness, you sense something honest in it. He listens. He sees people. He offers guidance in a world where certainty rarely exists. You rise, thanking him. He lifts the onion toward you again. Remember, he says, twice. A chill prickles your skin despite the warm bustle of the market. You tuck the onion carefully into your pouch and continue through the town, pondering snow creatures and double omens. Ahead, the road rises toward colder lands, where the mountains scrape the sky and winter holds tight even in summer. And from somewhere up there, carried faintly on the wind, comes a howl. Not wolf, not wind, but something eerily in between. Time to meet the creature of snow. Again. And eventually again. The road rises steadily toward the mountains, and with every step you take the world grows quieter, colder, and sharper, like you've walked into a place carved from breath and silence. The chatter of the marketplace fades behind you, replaced by the crunch of frost under your boots and the distant groan of glaciers shifting somewhere far above. Tall pines line the narrowing path, their branches heavy with snow, even though the season below is still pretending to be mild. It feels like you've changed climates in the span of half an hour. You tug your cloak tighter, the onion prophet's words keep bouncing around in your head. Twice, he said. A creature of snow. You're not sure why that phrasing unsettles you. Snow doesn't seem like the friendliest building material for a creature, but compared to demon donkeys, improvised dragons and opinionated forests, this actually feels like an improvement. Still, you stay alert. The wind grows stranger as you climb, thin and whistling, slipping between the rocks as though it has secrets to deliver. You pause near a pine with branches drooping low enough to brush your shoulder. The air is thick with the scent of winter, cold resin, brittle leaves, the metallic tang of ice. Then you spot the footprints, fresh ones, too large for a deer, too shapely for a bear, too deliberate for an avalanche goat. A real medieval category, by the way. They fall off cliffs a lot. These prints look almost human. 5 toes, widened heel, but stretched, elongated, each step spaced far apart as if the creature walks with giant loping strides. You crouch, studying them carefully. A mainstream historical fact taps your shoulder. Medieval Europe loved stories of wild mountain spirits, snow beings, and giant winter guardians. In the Alps and Carpathians, travellers whispered of creatures shaped from wind and ice, protectors or tricksters depending on whom you asked. Some said these beings formed themselves from storms, others believed they were souls of lost wanderers given new shape by the cold. You rise slowly. The mountain path narrows into a rocky corridor. Shadows pool between the stones. The footprints lead onward. You follow. The wind seems to watch you. Then you hear it. A soft, low hum, almost musical. You stop, breath frosting in the air. The hum vibrates faintly through the stones beneath your feet. You step forward again. The humming grows louder, richer, like the earth itself is exhaling a tune only mountains understand. Finally, you turn a corner and freeze. There it is, your first creature of snow. Except, it isn't what you pictured. It's perched on a boulder overlooking a frozen creek, its form humanoid in the loosest sense. Arms, torso, head. But its body's made of compacted snow and frost, shaped as if sculpted by a very indecisive artist. Its edges flicker with drifting ice crystals that swirl like tiny silver sparks. No face, just a smooth mask where one should be. It tilts its head toward you. You swallow, your cloak rustles. The creature makes a sound, soft, plaintive, like distant wind singing through a cave. Not threatening, not welcoming, just aware. You lift your hand tentatively. Hello? The creature responds by shivering. Not violently, just faintly, snowflakes cascading from its shoulders like it's shedding the cold itself. For a moment you think it might approach, but instead it steps backward, merging with the drifting snow. Its form fractures, cracks, dissolves into a flurry. Gone. You exhale. That's one, you murmur, brushing frost from your cloak. Your joke of the section slips out quietly. If the second one asks for the onion back, I'm leaving. The wind seems to chuckle, or maybe that's just your imagination working overtime. You continue along the path, boots crunching through deeper drifts. The air grows harsher, but the sky stays bright, sun glinting off the snow with blinding brilliance. You shield your eyes as the world becomes a glowing, icy sea. You descend into a shallow ravine where the wind suddenly dies, completely. The silence feels thick, padded, almost dreamlike. Your footsteps echo strangely as though the snow forgot how to absorb sound. Then you hear it, a whisper, not like the forest's mimicry, not a voice repeating your own. This is something rawer, older, a tremble of sound woven from winter. Lost. You stop dead in your tracks. The whisper comes again, drifting across the ravine. Lost. You turn slowly, heart thudding, and from behind a jagged ridge of ice a shape emerges, taller than the first creature, more defined. Its arms shift like drifting clouds, but its torso gleams faintly, compacted snow hardened into a sculpted form. Frost rims its limbs. Its face has eyes, hollow, icy, blinking with a faint blue glow. And it speaks again. Lost. This time its voice trembles with emotion, and you suddenly understand the prophet's warning. This one is not frightening. It's not malicious. It's pleading. You raise your hands gently. You're lost? The creature steps closer. Its form ripples with each movement, snow swirling off its edges like breath from a sleeping giant. It reaches a hand, if you can call it a hand, toward your chest, stopping inches away. Warm, it murmurs. A pang hits your heart. It's reaching for heat, for guidance, maybe even companionship. Historians still argue whether tales of snow spirits were metaphors for loneliness, real phenomena misinterpreted through fear, or simply storytelling traditions tied to treacherous winters. But here, watching a being of frost tremble as though struggling to hold its shape, none of those explanations matter. You speak softly. Do you want to go home? The creature's eyes flare brighter. Home! You glance around, the mountains stretch endlessly. How do you guide something made of winter itself? Then an idea strikes. You hold out your hand, palm open. Come with me, you say. We'll find the way. The creature steps closer, slow, hesitant, fragile. When its snowy fingers hover above yours, you feel, not cold, but emptiness. A chill that isn't harsh, but hollow. And then, a gust of wind sweeps the ravine. The creature flinches, its form wavers, cracks race across its body like lightning. You reach for it instinctively, but it dissolves, gently, silently, snow scattering into the air, only a faint echo lingers. Home. You stand in the drifting flurries, heart heavy with the odd ache of losing something that was never truly here, and yet was. You brush snow from your sleeve, feeling a quiet sorrow settle in your chest. The boy prophet warned you it would speak the second time. He did not warn you it would break your heart. You continue along the ridge, the wind picking up again, carrying whispers of winter dreams and long-forgotten stories. You wonder if the creature found peace in dissolving, or if its longing continues on the wind. Ahead, the snow thins. The path drops into warmer countryside again, where a faint melody drifts across the fields, notes floating from nowhere, soft as memory. Music with no musicians. Another strange medieval wonder awaits. You descend from the mountains with a strange heaviness in your chest. Part cold, lingering in your bones, part the melancholy left by the snow creature's fading whisper. The air warms bit by bit, melting the frost from your cloak. Grass begins to peek through patches of thawing earth. Trees regain their colour. But even as the world softens around you, something inside you remains tuned to the thin, fragile hush of winter. And then, just as the path widens into gentler land, you hear it. Music, soft, clear, pure. A melody drifting on the breeze, woven from notes so airy they seem stitched out of sunlight. No lute strings, no footsteps, no laughter, just sound, floating, gentle, impossibly delicate. You stop walking, because there's no one in sight. Fields stretch in all directions. A cluster of distant cottages lean sleepily against a riverbank. But the music, it seems to be coming from a small stone chapel perched on a hill. Its doors closed, windows shuttered, bell silent. You walk toward it slowly, drawn by the melody like a thread tugging firmly at the edges of your curiosity. The tune grows brighter as you climb the hill, lifting and falling, circling itself in patterns you don't recognize. It's not cheerful, not sad, just yearning. A woman hangs laundry nearby, pinning sheets to a line with stiff fingers. She glances at you and nods toward the chapel. You hear it too, she says, matter of fact as a weather report. You pause. What is it? She shrugs. Some say angels, some say spirits. Some say the chapel is remembering something. You blink. Remembering? Oh, yes. She steps closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Buildings remember, especially old ones, especially lonely ones. You're about to ask what exactly this chapel remembers when the woman's baby starts crying inside the cottage, and she rushes off, leaving you alone on the hill with the ethereal symphony. You approach the chapel, a squat stone building with moss crawling lovingly across its roof. The wooden door is locked with a heavy iron latch, and judging by the cobwebs, no one has opened it recently. Yet the music pours from inside, a soft, steady current flowing through the cracks. A mainstream historical fact drifts up from your mental attic. Medieval accounts are full of mysterious music, voices in empty chapels, singing that echoed from caves or hillsides, bells that rang with no hands pulling ropes. Some blamed angels, some blamed the dead, some blamed trickster fae, some blamed the acoustics of old buildings, which can create eerie resonance when wind passes through the right gaps. A gust of wind brushes past you, and the music shifts pitch, like the air itself is adjusting the melody. You press your hand against the chapel door. "Hello," you call softly. The music continues. You circle to the side of the building and press your ear against the cold stone wall. The sound vibrates faintly through the stone, as if the notes are inside the rock itself. You step back slowly. Okay, that's new. Further down the hill, a few villagers approach, their faces a mix of reverence and mild annoyance. "We heard it again," an old man mutters. "Woke me up before dawn." "It woke your rooster up," his wife corrects. "He screamed like someone stepped on him." They join you beside the chapel, listening. "It's been weeks," the woman says, rubbing her arms. "Every morning, every night. Same tune. No musician." A young man adds, "Last month, Brother Alric tried to open the door. The music stopped instantly. Dead silence. And when he walked away, he gestures toward the chapel. It started up again. Louder. "Perhaps it's a sign," the old man whispers. "Perhaps it's a draft," the young man replies. "Drafts don't harmonize," the old man snaps. You hide a smile. Then the door creaks. Everyone jerks backward. The latch remains locked, but the wood shifts slightly, as though something just pressed against it from the inside. The music swells, the notes tremble, rise, and suddenly spill into a soaring phrase so haunting your chest tightens. You feel the melody wrap around memories you forgot you had. Childhood afternoons, summer rain, the quiet ache of missing someone you don't even remember. A quirky fringe tidbit surfaces. Some medieval chroniclers claimed certain melodies could revive memories, soothe spirits, or open pathways between worlds. People believed music had spiritual weight, carrying influence, healing, prophecy, or longing. Others claimed phantom songs were trapped echoes from past ceremonies, looping endlessly until someone listened. And right now, you're listening. Then the tone shifts again, lower, deeper, trembling like a voice breaking with emotion. One of the villagers crosses himself. Another grips her shawl tightly. You whisper into the air, "What do you want?" The music dips to a single pure note. It hangs there, fragile as glass. Then silence, heavy, instant, absolute silence. The villagers hold their breath. You stare at the chapel door. Something unseen rests behind it, waiting. You step forward cautiously, kneel, and lay your palm on the stone threshold. "I hear you," you say softly. "I don't know what you're asking, but I hear you." For a moment, one fragile heartbeat, the stone beneath your hand warms. The villagers gasp. Then the warmth fades, the air settles, the quiet deepens once more. A woman touches your shoulder, voice trembling. What was that?" You shake your head. "I don't know, but I think it wanted someone to acknowledge it." An elderly man wipes his eyes. Music that lonely, it must have needed ears. Historians still argue whether phantom music was psychological, spiritual, architectural, or pure folklore, misheard wind, trapped echoes, or grief made audible. But something about this chapel feels too intentional for mere chance. The music didn't frighten, it reached. As you rise to leave, a faint chord hums through the air behind you. Just one note, barely there. A goodbye. You make your way down the hill, the villagers whispering among themselves, unsure whether to fear the phenomenon or cherish it. The road beckons again, winding toward a mist-covered rise where travellers say a legendary knight sleeps beneath the earth, waiting, watching, dreaming. And tonight, it seems, that dream might stir. You leave the chapel hill behind, its final trembling chord still humming somewhere deep in your ribs like a memory that refuses to fade. The road carries you onward through quiet farmland, where mist curls over the earth in slow, ghostly waves. The air is cool, metallic, touched with the scent of damp grass and burned firewood drifting from far-off cottages. But ahead, rising like a grey whale breaching from the landscape, is a lone, massive hill. Not a gentle slope, not a rocky mound, a hulking, perfectly rounded hill crowned with ancient oaks that claw at the sky. You stop, because you've heard whispers of this place already. "A sleeping knight," one villager had murmured. "Guarding something," said another. "Waiting for the right moment," whispered a third, eyes darting upward nervously. "And now, you're here." The hill lies still, but not dead. The air around it feels thick, like breath held too long. Even the birds circling overhead seem quieter, wings cutting the mist in near silence. You approach along a narrow path that skirts the hill's base. Mossy stones jut from the earth, forming crude half-walls, ruins of what once may have been a shrine or ancient watchpoint. A few candles flicker, in sheltered crevices, offerings left by travellers seeking blessings, protection, or luck. You place your hand on one of the stones. It's warm, odd. The mist swirls, wind stirs the oak branches above, making them creak like ancient doors, and then a voice behind you. You feel it too, don't you? You turn to find an elderly shepherd leaning on a crooked staff, his sheep grazing lazily behind him, blissfully unaware of any legendary slumber happening nearby. His eyes, however, shine with the excited fear of someone who's witnessed something too strange to dismiss. He gestures toward the hill. "That one there. He's not dead. Just waiting." You raise an eyebrow. "Waiting for what?" The shepherd shrugs. "Depends who you ask. Some say he'll rise when the kingdom is in peril. Others say only when the stars fall. My grandfather said he'll wake up when someone finally sings the right song." You nod slowly. And what do you think? He grins, revealing a tooth or two missing in action. I think people say a lot of things when they're bored. Fair enough. Still, the air thrums with something, a kind of pulsing quiet. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Medieval Europe is full of legends about buried kings and sleeping knights, Arthur beneath Avalon, Barbarossa slumbering in the Kyffhäuser, Charlemagne resting beneath Aegon, Fionn mac Cumhaill waiting under a mountain. These myths weren't just stories, they were promises, hope wrapped in folklore, the idea that heroes don't die, they wait. You climb partway up the hill, carefully, respectfully. The ground feels oddly solid, as though the earth beneath is reinforced by something more than soil and stone. Halfway up you find a ring of standing stones, weather-worn, leaning, covered in lichen. Someone carved symbols into them long ago. Spirals, swords, stars. One stone has a deep crack down its middle, as though struck by something powerful. You touch its surface. The crack radiates warmth. Then you hear it. A low, distant rumble. Not thunder, not hoofbeats. Something like armor shifting. You freeze. The shepherd below looks up sharply. There, hear that? Happens sometimes at dusk. The rumbling grows louder, vibrating faintly through the ground beneath your feet. A deep metallic scrape echoes from below like steel dragged along stone. The hairs on the back of your neck rise. You look toward the centre of the standing stones. The earth there bulges, just a little. A subtle shifting, like something huge beneath the soil just stretched. Your breath catches. The rumble softens, fades, and the hill falls silent again. You exhale slowly. The shepherd shouts, "See? Told you he stirs!" You walk cautiously around the ring, and that's when you spot it. A narrow fissure between two stones. A cave entrance. Tiny, half collapsed, but unmistakably carved by human hands. You duck low and peer inside. Cold air spills out, smelling of iron, old. Smoke and dust that hasn't moved in centuries. You whisper, "Hello?" The word disappears into the darkness, and then, from deep inside, the faintest reply. Not a voice, not exactly. A breath. Slow, heavy, sleeping. You stumble back, heart thumping. Your mind races. That was not wind. That was not an animal. That was the exhale of something enormous. Historians still argue whether such legends were born from real burials, acoustics in caves, natural geological shifts, or cultural longing for saviours in troubled times. But you're standing on a hill that literally breathed at you. This feels far beyond the metaphoric comfort of folklore. You kneel near the entrance, unsure if you're supposed to speak again. Your breath fogs the air. The shepherd climbs up beside you, panting. "I've seen lights here at night," he whispers. "Blue ones. And once I swear I heard someone shouting orders from underground like a battle drill." You swallow. "Has anyone tried to enter?" "Only once," he says. "A man from the next village. Said he'd prove the stories wrong." You raise an eyebrow. "What happened?" "He came back pale as milk," the shepherd replies. "Wouldn't speak a word. Left the village next morning. Never returned." You consider how many more life-threatening mysteries you've already survived this week. "Right," you murmur. "Good to know." You stand and place your palm on the nearest stone again. The warmth pulses faintly, like the echo of a heartbeat deep within the earth. You whisper softly, unsure who you're addressing, but compelled anyway. "Rest easy. The world isn't ending today." The wind stirs as if answering. The oak branches rattle, and for one fragile second, you feel something calm wash through the hill, like the night beneath heard you and eased into deeper sleep. As you descend the slope, the shepherd waves you off. "Careful on the road ahead," he warns. "Strange things gather near old shrines." You thank him and continue your journey, the path curling through twilight shadows. The warm pulse of the buried night lingers in your thoughts as the sky deepens to velvety indigo, and soon, in the next village, people whisper excitedly of statues that move on their own, and holy icons that bleed, because apparently your night isn't getting quieter anytime soon. Night settles around you as you leave the sleeping night's hill behind, the world dimming into that deep velvety blue that makes torches burn brighter and shadows stretch longer. The road winds between quiet fields and small shrines, stone niches holding carved saints, flickering candles, faded flowers. You nod to each one as you pass, not because you're superstitious, of course, but because it seems profoundly unwise to ignore any spiritual entity after the week you've had. A cluster of cottages soon appears in the distance, their windows glowing like warm fireflies. As you approach, you notice something unusual. People are gathering outside the local church, holding lanterns, whispering urgently, eyes flicking toward the darkened doorway. A woman spots you immediately. "Traveller," she calls softly, "have you come to see the signs?" Before you can ask what signs, a man presses a candle into your hand. "Stay close," he says gravely. "It moved again." You blink. "What moved?" His eyes widen. "The statue." "Ah, excellent. Just once you'd love for the medieval world to hand you something normal, like a tax form or a slightly burnt pie. But no, moving statues it is." The group ushers you into the church. The heavy wooden door creaks open, and you're hit with the familiar scent of incense, dust, and old stone. Candles flicker along the walls, casting gold light over the pews. At the front stands a carved wooden statue of a saint, life-sized, robed, holding a staff. It seems completely ordinary, except it's facing the wrong direction. Not toward the altar, toward the back of the church, toward you. You stop mid-step, a chill creeps along your spine. One of the villagers whispers, "It turned during Vespers." Another shakes her head. "No, it turned this afternoon. My nephew saw it." A third adds in a hushed, scandalized tone, "It was facing east yesterday." A mainstream historical fact floats into your thoughts. Medieval Europe is full of accounts of miraculous statues, moving, weeping, sweating, or changing expression. Some were likely caused by temperature changes, water seepage, shifting foundations, or enthusiastic imaginations. Others became pilgrimage centers overnight. Entire towns changed fortunes based on a single perceived blink. You step closer to the statue. The candlelight dances across its wooden face, making its eyes appear almost alive. You examine its base. The planks beneath look uneven, centuries-old boards warped slightly by moisture. You touch one gently. It wobbles, just a little. You glance back at the villagers, who watch you with a mixture of hope and fear. You don't want to, ruin the magic, but you also prefer to avoid being crushed by a toppling saint. Before you can say anything, someone gasps. "Look!" A bead of moisture, clear, glistening, unmistakable, forms beneath the statue's right eye. A woman drops to her knees. "It's weeping!" She cries. Your breath catches, not because you think the statue is truly weeping, but because the room suddenly feels charged, as if the air is thickened with emotion. You step closer. The droplet grows, slides down the statue's cheek, falls, hits the floor with a soft tap. Gasps ripple through the crowd like wind through wheat. A man murmurs, "A sign of blessing." Another whispers, voice trembling, or warning. The priest, a tired-looking man with dark circles and the posture of someone who's been arguing with villagers all week, steps forward. He kneels beside the statue, touches the wet trail with trembling fingers, and frowns thoughtfully. "It may be condensation," he says. "A draft in the roof, moisture gathering on the wood." The villagers stare at him as though he just insulted their ancestors. One woman snaps, "Then explain why it faces us." The priest clears his throat. "Shifting boards, perhaps." A man shakes his head. "Then why only at night?" The priest opens his mouth, but nothing comes out. Tough crowd. You step back, noticing something the others don't. The statue's shadow flickers strangely, not in sync with the candles, as if something passed between you and the saint for a moment, making the light bend. You blink hard. The shadow returns to normal. Maybe you imagined it. Maybe you didn't. A quirky fringe tidbit surfaces. Some medieval chroniclers wrote about living icons, believing saints could temporarily inhabit statues to communicate with the faithful. People claim to see carved hands flex, eyes shift, robes ripple as though stirred by a breeze. True, hallucinations, flickering torchlight. No one knows, but the stories persist. Someone behind you whispers a prayer. Another starts crying softly, overwhelmed by the moment. A young boy clutches his mother's sleeve, whispering, "Is the saint angry?" You kneel down to him. "I don't think he's angry," you say gently. "Maybe he's just listening." The boy nods, comforted. You wish you felt as certain as you sound. Suddenly a loud crack echoes through the church. The crowd gasps and jumps back. Your heart leaps. but it's only a beam in the ceiling shifting with the night air. Still, your pulse refuses to calm down. The priest rises and speaks in a steady voice. Whatever this is, we will observe it calmly. We will not jump to conclusions. Someone in the back mutters, "It blinked yesterday," but no one seems eager to follow up on that claim. Historians still argue whether statues wept due to natural moisture, intentional trickery, or collective religious fervour. But standing here, surrounded by villagers clutching candles and hope in equal measure, you understand something deeper. The moment itself is the miracle, the way people gather, the way their beliefs converge, the way they feel seen by each other, if not by the saint. You stand, feeling the weight of the room shift as if the statue's presence extends to the very stones. Then softly the priest begins a hymn. The villagers join. The church fills with trembling voices. And as the final note fades, a soft breeze brushes your cheek. Strange, given the windows are all closed. You look up. The statue faces forward again. Everyone freezes. Silence. You feel a prickling sensation crawl up your spine. Then a baby starts crying, which somehow breaks the tension magnificently. People breathe out. The priest nearly collapses in relief. You step outside into the cool night, grateful for fresh air and the lack of carved eyes watching you. The path ahead gleams with moonlight silvering the road. Your mind whirls with questions about miracles, illusions, belief, and the very strange week you've had. And as you follow the moonlit trail toward the last stretch of your journey, the villagers whisper behind you, "Be careful on the road. There is a man who hasn't aged in 40 years. Of course there is. The medieval world always saves something uncanny for dessert. You walk beneath a sky bright with moonlight, the air cool enough to keep you alert but soft enough to lull your thoughts into that drifting, dreamlike state where everything feels a little more possible than it should. The path ahead curves gently through rolling fields brushed silver by the night. Crickets trill, a small stream whispers over stones, after statues that turn, saints that blink, and snow creatures that whisper for home. You can't help feeling like the world has shifted just a little. Not entirely magical, not entirely ordinary. Somewhere in between. The villager's warning echoes faintly in your mind. There is a man who hasn't aged in 40 years. You've handled prophetic onions and demonic donkeys. You're not about to turn back now. The moon climbs higher, spilling light across a tiny settlement ahead. A handful of cottages, smoke drifting gently upward. A lantern swings outside one door, and sitting beside that lantern, on a simple wooden stool as though waiting for late-night company, is a man with silver hair, calm eyes, and a posture too straight to belong to someone rumoured to be ancient. He looks up as you approach, and he smiles. Not dramatically, not mysteriously, just kindly. "Traveller," he says in a voice so smooth it could pass for warm honey. "You're late." You blink. "Am I?" He nods once as though this is a fact of the universe. But no matter. Come, sit. The night is long enough. You hesitate for the briefest moment, because when a stranger who allegedly hasn't aged in decades invites you to sit at midnight, that's the kind of invitation fairy tales warn you about. But he seems harmless, calm, grounded. You sit. Up close, he looks ageless in the strangest way. Not youthful, not old, just paused. His face carries no deep lines except those formed from decades of smiling gently. His eyes are bright but not sharp. His hair is silver, not from age but from something else entirely, like he stepped out of a painting. You clear your throat. "People told me you haven't aged," he chuckles softly. "People like stories. They make sense of the senseless." "Is it true?" He lifts his gaze to the moon before answering. "True enough for them." You wait. He doesn't elaborate. A mainstream historical fact hums in your mind. Medieval Europe loved tales of ageless wanderers, saints, mystics, cursed souls, immortals waiting for prophecy, men who drank from enchanted springs, or travellers blessed or doomed to walk centuries seeking redemption. Some were symbolic, some were cautionary tales, some were just really good stories that got better every time someone retold them at a fireside. The man rests his hands on his knees. "Tell me," he says, "what have you seen on your journey?" You exhale. "Strange things." "Strange how?" You start listing them, and he listens, truly listens, with a stillness that feels reverent. Comets, bones glowing, wandering saints, beast men that were dogs, fasting girls, doomsday prophets, dragons that were cows, birds singing hymns, donkeys impersonating demons, cursed wells, dancing plagues, ghostly cavalcades, whispering forests, onion prophets, snow spirits, singing chapels, sleeping knights, bleeding statues. Through it all he makes no sound, no gasp, no laugh, no disbelief. When you finish, he smiles softly, like someone who's heard all these tales before and loves them anyway. Then he says, "The world is full of wonders, but people forget to see them." You tilt your head. "And you?" He gives a small shrug. "I just see things as they happen." You study him more closely. His skin glows faintly in the lantern light, not unnaturally, just healthily. His eyes gleam gently. His breathing is steady, unhurried, like someone who's made peace with time. "Why don't you age?" you ask. He considers this carefully, as though deciding how much truth to give you. "Perhaps I was blessed," he says. "Perhaps cursed. Perhaps simply caught in a moment that refused to end. That's vague." He laughs, a warm, low sound. "Yes, most real things are." You decide to try a different angle. "Do you remember being young?" "Of course." "But nothing changed after a certain point?" He shakes his head. "Oh, everything changed. I simply didn't." There's something quietly heartbreaking in the way he says it. A soft weariness hiding beneath kindness. A quirky fringe tidbit nudges you. Medieval legends often depict ageless wanderers as neither heroes nor villains. They're warnings. Lessons. Souls tasked with witnessing rather than living fully. Some said they were bound by broken oaths. Others said they guarded secret knowledge. "Are you alone?" you ask gently. He smiles. "Not tonight." You feel a warmth spread in your chest, unexpected, gentle. Then he taps the lantern beside him. The flame flickers bright. "Time moves strangely," he murmurs. "Some lives stretch wide, others stretch long. Mine stretches." You lean forward. "Will you ever age again?" He looks toward the fields, where the moonlight ripples across the grass. "When I'm needed no more, I think." The simplicity of the answer hits you harder than you expect. "Do you want to age?" you ask. He closes his eyes, breathes in, breathes out. "Yes," he says softly. "I think I do." A silence settles between you, not heavy, not awkward, just real. And when he finally stands, stretching his limbs with graceful ease, you almost expect him to crumble into dust or glow like a saint. But he simply pats your shoulder. "Rest well, traveller," he says. "Your journey was long. Sleep calls you." You blink. "You know it's bedtime for me?" He smiles. "It's bedtime for everyone, eventually." You rise. The lantern glows softly behind him. And as you walk away down the moonlit road, something compels you to look back. But the stool is empty. Lantern flickering. Door closed. No sign of the ageless man. Historians still argue whether such tales sprang from isolated hermits, illnesses that keep people preserved, spiritual myths, or wishful thinking. But tonight feels like the medieval world simply wanted to give you one final, gentle mystery. And now, at last, your path softens. The night quiets, your steps slow. The road grows softer beneath your feet now, the earth warming gradually as the silver edges of the night round into something quieter, gentler, almost tender. The world seems to exhale with you, each breath easing the weight of the journey you've carried through forests, villages, mountains, and moonlit fields. The cool night air settles around your shoulders like a familiar blanket, loosening your muscles, slowing your pulse, inviting your thoughts to drift rather than run. The moon hangs steady above, no longer sharp and dazzling, but softened by a thin haze that turns its light to milk. The sounds around you melt into a slow, steady rhythm. A distant owl, the whisper of grass, the low hum of wind curling through branches. Every sensation stretches out, unrushed, as though time itself has decided to walk beside you instead of ahead of you. You feel the memories of the strange medieval world settling gently, comets fading to quiet stars, miracle bones dimming to simple relics, saints and spirits dissolving like morning mist. Even the snow creature's trembling whisper fades into something warm and soft. Each wonder becomes a small ember tucked into the back of your mind, glowing just enough to warm you without keeping you awake. Your steps slow further, your breathing deepens, and the night folds around you with the calm certainty of a story closing its last page. The world grows hushed, steady, safe. You let that safety rise up through your chest, loosening the final knots of the day, so you allow yourself to settle, to soften, to be still. The lantern light in your memory flickers once more, and then the world becomes wonderfully, peacefully quiet.